that, let's call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending tonight's meeting. We value our residents and community members, and even though our doors are temporarily closed during business hours to protect you all, we want to make sure that anyone who wants to participate in our meetings and to provide input can do so. State statute allows the city to conduct meetings by telephone, and the council recently took action to allow our city council and commission meetings to temporarily take place remotely during the pandemic emergency. This meeting may be open to the public, but precautions set forth by the Centers for Disease Control, the Minnesota Department of Health, and Carver County Public Health should be exercised. Alternatively, participants can join this meeting remotely via Zoom conferencing services. Zoom is a free service and can be accessed via the following. On your mobile device, you can download the Zoom app from either the App Store or Google Play. On your laptop, you can log into zoom.us from your computer or similar device, or if you just want to call in, you can call in at 253-215-8782, so that last four is 8782. When you're prompted, the meeting ID number that you will enter is 902-655-933. So again, the phone number that you'll dial is 253-215-8782, and the meeting ID is 902-655-933. For anyone joining us by phone only, please be aware of these important instructions. We are broadcasting this meeting live and recording it. You will also need to watch the meeting online if you would like to see any visuals presented during the meeting. There could be up to a 1-minute delay from the live conference call to the online broadcast for what you're seeing if you're watching this online on your computer. So there'll be a little bit of that delay. We will account for that when members of the public are providing feedback, but just to give everybody a heads up. Please mute any external devices like your TV, music, or computer speakers to avoid distractions if addressing the council. All participants calling into the meeting will be muted until citizens' comments are recognized. You will be prompted by the mayor to speak at the appropriate time. Lines will temporarily be unmuted when the mayor calls for public comment. We ask that anyone wishing to address the council ask to be recognized, be respectful, wait for your turn to speak, and don't speak over one another. It is important that all council members and members of the public be able to hear each other and the discussion. So please speak loudly, speak clearly, and speak directly into your phone or microphone. Please listen to the mayor's cues. Callers wishing to be recognized must speak up to get into the queue when prompted by the mayor. Callers will still need to provide their names and addresses for the record. Finally, different from our usual process, all actions of the council will be taken by a roll call vote. This is a new process for us all, and we thank you for your patience and constructive feedback as we work through this unprecedented situation. We are working hard to ensure your voice is heard while maintaining everyone else's health and safety. All right, at this point, Mr. Merrick, can you take attendance, please?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Councilmember Henry.
Aye.
Councilmember Henry, I believe just a reminder to the council, when signifying aye, following the aye, repeat your name, just for the record. Councilmember Henry.
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Ma.
Present, Christine.
Councilmember Sayer.
President, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight.
Present, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Present, Courtney Johnson. Thank you, Brent. Let's see, before we approve the agenda, I have one addition to make to the agenda, and that would be under number 5, presentations and reports, to add a report from Mr. Merrick on Riverside Park. So with that addition, can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Glenn, you got to take yourself off of mute.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Henry and a second by Councilmember Mock. Mr. Mayor, can you take a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye. Glenn Henry.
thank you, sir. Councilmember Mock,
Aye. Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye. Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye. Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson.
Mayor Johnson, could I ask a question?
Sure.
And Brent, in the notes that we received for the meeting, I believe it stated we didn't need to say our name when we were doing roll call for our votes. Is that incorrect for us to say our name?
I'll defer to Larry Harris. Larry, provide some guidance on this one for us.
I don't see any requirement that you provide your name, but it certainly makes the record cleaner if you do. So recommended but not required.
Courtney, would you like us to do?
Yeah, let's just continue saying our names if we can remember it. I think it might just be easier.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, moving on, we've approved the agenda. Moving on to item number 4, community comment. If there are any members of the community who would like to make a comment, now would be the time. I'm going to pause and allow for a minute to let that work through the video process. Where do you want me to look? Okay.
There's people that are watching.
Okay.
People in the
Okay.
I
Yes.
know it's weird.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, it has been a minute. It appears that we don't have any community comments, so we will move on to presentations and reports, Riverside Park. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I appreciate you giving me the time tonight to talk about an issue that has been around Carver for quite some time, but we really haven't addressed it. But as a councilor, have asked the council to address it. Excuse me, and that's related to when we open and close Riverside Park when we are in flood conditions. And so one of the things that we wanted to bring to you is some guidance, or get some guidance, excuse me, on a policy related to how we open and close. And so for many years, whether it be Paul Schultz or Brian Spoke, we've opened and closed that park based on flooding conditions, but we haven't had a documented policy or triggers that would signify that the park's going to be closed. And so it can come off to the community and residents who use the area as arbitrary. And so what we really wanted to do is get a sense from the council of how you wanted that park managed from an open and closure standpoint, so that we can draft a policy so that we can follow that internally on a consistent basis. And then second, that we can communicate that policy to residents. And so one of the things that really prompts this is the access to the boat landing, as well as just people getting into the nature areas. And we've had problems in the past with folks when it's been a little bit soggier down there. We just, the sheriff's office apprehended an individual who kind of shorthand went mudding down there, and they ended up where they were apprehended and charged, etc. But there are plenty of times where that isn't the case. It's a minimum maintenance road, so there's one lane. So if you can't pass it, in an area that might be difficult to turn around in. And there are a bunch of different elements that are there. And so if I could call on Brian Swope, the city's public services director. Brian, if you could just share kind of from a firsthand perspective some of the things that you think about when you are contemplating a closure and when you're also contemplating reopening the park for public access.
Sure. In the past, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we actually put a chart together that really identified the river levels and what it does, what it's doing in Carver. And what really has triggered in the past is once that parking lot becomes flooded and really the use of that boat landing is pretty minimal. When that is flooded, usually the grass that's on the west side there is usually starting to flood as well. That's always been our trigger to kind of close it, to kind of prevent people from, like Brent said, mudding down there, kind of going off road. So we've always used kind of an elevation off the Jordan gauge, which indicates the flooding of that parking lot is what we've used in the past for doing it. Typically after the water's receded, we usually wait a few days to let that ground dry out before we reopen the park. And we have the ability to get back in and get the front end loader and clean out the boat landing so that when people are able to get into the park, they're able to actually launch their boat at the same time. So that's kind of what we used the last few years as a indicator of what to do.
Thank you, Brian. And so kind of fast forward to this weekend, we had a number of conversations related to should we open the park. We had a few emails related to, get the boat launch open or get the park open. People are shelter in place. Let's get them out to the parks. Let's make that boat launch available. And so kind of departure from past practice, we decided to be a little bit more open about opening the park, if you will. And it turns out that we had somebody down there that kind of did a little bit of off-roading. It's kind of hard to see the damage right now because there's been some additional water. But kind of the other side of the coin is within the last day or so, there's been a number of folks that have reached out to the city asking us to close the park and not having or not allowing additional damage to occur because they saw trucks down there, etc. And we asked them to, when they see that, to contact the sheriff's office immediately to report that, the vehicle description, etc. But it still leaves kind of a policy question or a gap on how we should be navigating this. And so we're looking to get some or establish some consistency. And so what I'd like to have is a little bit of feedback from the council on your overall philosophy of how this park should be managed during times of flooding or when the soils are soft. And then I can work together with Brian and the rest of the team on crafting a draft policy for your review at a future meeting. So I'd open it up for comments or questions from the council.
All right. I will just go first. I think with it being open this weekend, it's too premature. There is water in there everywhere. There's water over the archery fields, and you can't even get far enough down that road to even get halfway to the boat launch. My concern is not only the dinglings who go in there and tear it up whenever they get the opportunity, but also the fact that just with the way that approaches, you can't really see how much water is right there until it's too late, and then everything's super soft and there's nowhere to turn around, especially if you're towing a boat. So I think it's more of a threat to have it open at this point, to be honest. And I get it. When I was talking to Brent this afternoon, my talking point from 2019 was that Riverside Park was closed for more weeks than it was open. But I think we all know that we're living on borrowed time with that park, and I think we need to take care of it as much as we can. So when it's at this point and there's still so much water in the park, it's definitely a little bit premature to be opening it up. Does anybody else have any feedback, thoughts? Okay, sorry, Christy, I saw Joy first. Go ahead, Joy.
Sure. My thoughts are that, of course, we want it to be safe for residents to go there. So everything that Courtney said and everything that Brian said about the water covering areas that you can access, the soil being soft, where you can't drive, where you get stuck. We want it to be safe for residents to go. So I think that if we kind of define what safety means based upon the water levels, the soil, whether it's cleaned up, accessible, okay to turn around, those sorts of things, that's what I would support.
Christy?
So with Riverside Park, I have heard over the years many times our fishermen really like to get down there, among all the rest of the folks who like to walk dogs and go down there to get a little bit away there in our nature park on the river. If the boat launch is accessible, I think it should be open. I'm a little bit less concerned about if it is mucky. People can drive over it when it's not. I understand the damage, but the amount of actual, real events that we have going on down there that it would matter. I'm not advocating for people to drive over the grass, but we also are on borrowed time with that park a little bit. So to me, I would rather have it open as much as we possibly could. I know that if the water is over the road or if it is, coming over the banks, obviously we would not want to put anyone's safety in jeopardy there. I do think it's important to keep it open as much as possible. And it really is, excuse me, Mayor Johnson, when you talked about it being closed more than open, that's looking at the warm season. That park is used over the entire year. So yes, definitely during the warm season, it's been closed in the last couple of years more than we've seen, but it is open all year long and people do enjoy it all seasons of the year. So I guess my suggestion would be, with safety in mind, to have it reopen as soon as possible and close as late as possible. Again, I'm less concerned about ripping up the grass. I don't want it to happen, but I do want to get our fisherwomen down there also to be able to use that, because they do really enjoy it, and we do hear from them that they're missing it when it's closed.
Thanks, Christy. Glenn? Go ahead, Glenn.
For pure safety reasons, I'm not so much concerned about them driving around on the grass on the west side as I am driving on the campground side, because the river is right there, and with as high as it is, sometimes it's tough to tell where the water ends or where the grass ends and the water starts. And if it's as bad as it is, I don't want people tearing around on the campground side. And I would much rather, Brian, as long as it's been working well with using the Jordan elevations for the water levels from the Jordan, I'm fine with that. Yes, I'd like to people have as much access as possible, but I'm more concerned about them going on the river side and into the river than I am having them drive on the archery side and the open park. A few years ago, we pulled the trout out of the river. What was it, 6, 8 years ago? And nobody knew anything about the trout other than it was possibly stolen. How long it was there, nobody knew. So I'm more concerned about safety and security of the people staying off of the riverside grass than I am off of the archery side. As far as the park or the boat landing, do what we can with it under the circumstances. Keep it open as much as possible. The reality of it is, cleaning it out, according to you, Brian, has been kind of a hazard, and I can see that where it has been. So let's just do our best for what we can.
Lori? You didn't raise your hand, but just giving you an opportunity.
I see Christy raise her hand too.
Just wanted to ask one question after Glenn had asked Brian about the Jordan River gauge. Maybe I just need more clarity. When you say you use their gauges to decide for our Carver Park, is there a level that you're using, or tell me a little more? I guess maybe I misunderstood or don't quite understand how you gauge from what they have as to what we have. So when they close something, does that make us close something, or do they close something and we could wait a few days before we close?
Yeah. Good question. We actually worked with Bolton and Mink, and we took the elevation based on that gauge in Jordan and transitioned it to an actual elevation in Carver. So when we read it, our graph, and I'll get the graph out to everybody. I'll get it to Brent. He can share with everybody. But it really does show you what the elevation is referred to in Jordan and what it looks like in Carver. So you are right. It's like a day's lag. So the Jordan gauge says, 14 or whatever. And it's usually a day later we see that, but we actually reference it to be an actual number. That said, with the new lift station that's going in at the end of Main Street there by the trestle, we are going to put an actual in Carver gauge in there, so that'll be something different. Once the river stays down long enough and we get all the pieces and parts in for that, it'll be an actual gauge for in town. So we'll know that, so we'll have a little bit better understanding of it. But we do have kind of a reference back and forth that Bolton and Mink kind of helped us put together.
Does that answer your question, Christy? You good? Thumbs up. Okay, go ahead, Lori.
My thoughts are a little more aligned with what Councilmember Mock was saying, where I would just like to really allow us to maximize the usage of the boat ramp. So that just be kind of the criteria. If the boat ramp is accessible, have the park open. More just put the ownership on patrons to use their best judgment when it comes to, where they should be driving and not driving, and what their comfort level is for safety. But I would like to see it open as much as possible, just to really maximize the use of it.
Thank you. And I want to be clear, I have no issues with it being open. I just, at this point right now, and when I went down to the park yesterday, with there being so much water still in there, so you can't get halfway down the road. You're getting absolutely nowhere near the boat launch in its current state. And with that being the case, it doesn't make any sense to me for it to be opened right now. It seems to be way more dangerous and way more of a threat than what I feel comfortable with keeping it open. I have no problem that once the river levels get to the point where you can access that boat launch, and the public services crew have whatever time they need to take to clear the debris and the muck out of there to make it a usable boat launch. I have no issues with having that kind of be the barometer for opening that park or closing it, but it was opened a little too prematurely last weekend for my taste. Go ahead, Glenn.
I'd just like to say that no fisherman in their right mind is going down using that boat landing right now anyway, because the rivers, they don't go fishing in the river right now because it's just raging where it is. And so I don't have a problem at all closing it right now until it goes down to the level that we want to have it at, so that it's at least safe for them even launch their boats. But with the elevation of the river, nobody's in there fishing. That's just the way it is.
Any other thoughts? Does anybody object to the viability and the usability of that boat launch being the barometer for opening or closing that park?
I guess the water comes up in that parking lot, so as the water starts to recede through that parking lot, even if, and Brian, you may have to correct me if I'm wrong, even if the loader can't get in quite yet to the actual launch part to clean it out, there still comes a point where as the water recedes, the parking lot opens up and you can get all the way down there and turn back around. So to say that the boat launch has to be fully operational, to me doesn't seem like maybe the only marker or the marker to use. I think it's important to have open, but I've been down there many times where you can easily drive at that point. The water's receded off the road and it's basically gone, but it's still coming up that boat launch. So you could go down there and walk around and drive your car around and turn around and have plenty of room. So, Brian, can you maybe answer? I mean, that seems to me personally to be safe enough. If you can drive your car down to that parking lot and turn it around and come back out.
Yeah, there's a time in which you can drive down and turn around there. The problem we ran into, and I think the reason why we waited a little bit longer to open it, is because we've had people drive in there with their boats and then try to launch the boat and get their truck and trailer stuck in the muck that's in the boat ramp. So we've had to go and kind of deal with that. So we just kind of went, well, once we can get down there and do that, and again, it can be anything you want. It was just what we kind of picked as once we can get in there and clean that boat ramp out so people can launch their boat easily, safely, is when we open it again. So it can be any one of those, but you're right. You can go down there and turn around before that boat launch will be open, or safely open.
So, I mean, in the past, I've hosted events down there, and you know, the water, you can see it's still, it's not ready for boat launching, but we've been perfectly safe having an event without that launch being quite ready to be open. So I think we might want to consider what that looks like too.
Would we be able to see a plan, Brian and Brent, I think, that we could see what literally what the gauge is for that parking lot being open, and then what the gauge is, and continue to use the gauge as the barometer, but have it, it needs to be at, and I don't know what the numbers are, but throwing it out there, but 21 feet to open up the park because you can get to the parking lot, or 19 and a half so that you can get to the boat launch, or whatever that is. Is that reasonable?
Yes, I think that's exactly what we should do. It's going to have to be a little bit scientific, based on it might take us some time to do this, where we're going to we track what the river gauge is and what the park looks like, and then do kind of a photo analysis of that. Because although well-intentioned, I think this conversation kind of encapsulates kind of where we're at with our own implementation. Is there are a lot of varying degrees of where we go, and I think that's unfortunately, and Brian will probably get a chuckle out of this, but or hopefully he will. I think sometimes public services is unfairly kind of judged, and I probably have done it before too. Is they use their best judgment in trying to keep that park open, but there's always an alternative point of view, and without any documentation, it's going to be a judgment call. And so, and because people are passionate about that park, I think that adds an extra layer of anxiety about how to manage it. And so, we're going to want to spend some time to make sure that the council is aware of how the policy impacts it, so that whether it's Brian or myself or Vicki or Paul Schultz, whoever's making the decision on that, it's based on what that document says, and that document is based on what we understand the river, how that river impacts the park. Because whatever policy is adopted, this is one of those types of policies where there are going to be divergent points of view on. And so I just want to be ready for that, and perhaps when we get that, we can maybe be a little bit more aggressive in soliciting some resident engagement on it, because I think this is kind of one of the things that Carver is known for, is Riverside Park and having access to it. We've had reports from the sheriff's office and others downtown that even when the gates close, people will drive up onto the River Bluffs Regional Trail, either by the tugboat or via Casey's, and try to go down there. So it's something that people are going to try to get into, or some people have tried to get into, even when it's closed. And so this understanding that as a part of the context, I think, will be helpful. I say all this to preview to the council that this is going to take us probably a bit of time to get you a first draft.
All right. Thank you, Brent. Let's see. Moving on, we need to just put the the public hearing on hold for a second because that can't take place before 7 o'clock. So let's skip past that and move on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Joy McKnight.
All right. We have a motion by Councilmember McKnight
And I'll make a second.
and a second by Councilmember Sayre. Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mott,
Aye, Christie Mack.
Councilmember Sayre,
I, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right. Nothing for unfinished business. For new business, we have the Timber Creek EAW. Ms. Smith.
Get my screen share work. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight we will be discussing the Timber Creek Environmental Assessment Worksheet, the findings of fact, conclusion, and record of decision. So a little bit of background about where we are. This property is typically called the Song property due to the family that has owned it for several years. It's been the Song farm. So based on location, we are just south of Meridian Fields and Highway 212. We're west of Carver Elementary, Copper Hills, and Oak Tree. Let's see. Jonathan Carver Parkway is the main corridor running north and south with access from Monroe Drive and Ironwood Drive. So previously the council has seen this concept plan, and this concept plan was what triggered the environmental assessment worksheet to begin. So based on Minnesota state statute, any housing development that has more than 250 unattached units, an environmental assessment worksheet is required right off the bat. So Timber Creek right now is proposed to have 270 detached units with the addition of townhomes, bringing it to 344 units. But it's the unattached units that trigger the process of the EAW. So what an EAW is that it's the environmental assessment worksheet. It takes a look at a project on all levels. So it looks at both the natural and built environment after a project is completed. So it looks at things like water resources, air quality, and then something like traffic. So something more that's built after the project. So at a previous meeting, we discussed the EAW and the council deemed it to be complete. So at that point, we were able to route the EAW to a group of experts. I'll go through the list shortly on another slide. But since it was complete, we were able to start the comment period. So we'll go through the comments that have been received from the agencies and what the next steps are. Something to note, there's no land use review tonight. So the EAW was the first step for this process. So right now we're not contemplating annexation, preliminary plat, rezoning, or final plat. We are just discussing the EAW, the findings of the fact, conclusion, and record of decision. So again, just really quick, there was a kind of a quick and dirty version of what an EAW was included in the packet, but it's a process run through the Environmental Quality Board. There are many acronyms throughout this entire process. The EQB is an office of the state, and they run the EAW process to make sure that we're checking all the boxes, making sure the correct agencies see the information, and they go through the EAW to make sure it's complete. So tonight, the question is if an environmental impact statement is required. So an EAW is step one. So an EAW, if there's a big red flag, you typically find out during the EAW process. So if, for example, find out there's an endangered species of trees on the property and the project would completely wipe it out, an EIS might be required to mitigate that. So think about the project a little bit differently, change it if necessary, and the EIS would do that. So it would take the impact and you'd be able to change the project based on that. The EAW again is 20 questions set by the EQB. We don't decide what those questions are. Each EAW needs to check the same boxes, answer the same questions, and and they're all reviewed by the same regulatory agencies. So there's a group on the next slide that is long, it's a large group, but then it's also any jurisdiction that has any authority over the property. So for this one specifically, a good example would be the Carver County Public Works. So since we're in Carver County and the JCP project is happening, they had some comments, obviously, they're anticipated, but that's a group that we had to send it to. That's not typically on a list for everyone since it's specific to Carver County. So again, it's required at this point. The EAW had to happen to move this project forward. So here's the list of people that the EAW was sent to. It's the experts in each of their fields. Something that is great about an EAW is that it lets so many different people take a look at it and put their lens on it. So the State Archaeological Office has a different review than I do. They have a different review than Carver County Public Works does. And they all have the opportunity to comment and provide feedback to us. The EAW additionally was available on the city's website, at the post office, and then a hard copy was available at City Hall. So if anyone wanted to take a look at it, it was available at several locations. And these groups all had 30 days to review this document. So it ran roughly from the beginning of February to early March to provide comments to us. So included in the packet, you have all of the comments that were received. So 10 different agencies, 9 agencies, and 1 resident provided comments. So they objectively looked at the EAW and said, I know about this specific thing, I want to bring it up so that the city has to address it, the developer has to address it, or we have to think about it during platting. So the groups were the MPCA, the Met Council, Carver County Public Works, State Preservation Office, Eastern Carver County Schools, Carver County Planning and the CCWMO, MnDOT. Bruce Finkel is the one property owner. He's directly adjacent to this project. The State Archaeological Office, and the Minnesota DNR. So comments that were received, you'll see my responses are all in red, and several of them are just comment noted, we'll address in platting. So something to think about is that we're only at concept phase for this project right now. So if you think about preliminary plat, that's where we start to get to know the project a little bit more. We start to figure out some of the details, where the water is going to go, how the streets are actually going to lay out. But since we have these EAW comments, we have some guidance from these groups that know probably more about a specific part of the project than we do. So having those comments, it allows us to make more informed decisions through the planning process with the developer to make sure that we're addressing their comments that they sent to us from the EAW. So notable comments that you probably saw was that an archaeological survey is going to be required prior to preliminary plat approval. So 2 agencies let us know that, hey, we don't know specifically if there are remains or other artifacts that might be found on the property, but there could be. So something that we decided as a group would be that an additional survey would be required just to dig into that literally a little bit further to think about the area. We don't know a ton about the Timber Creek area because it's been privately owned for so long that there hasn't been public access to that area. So we want to make sure that we're not missing anything at that point. So prior to preliminary plat approval, there will be a survey completed, will be routed to the agencies that requested it. Since they're the experts in that area, they can take a look at it, make sure it checks their boxes. And we also make sure that during construction, they're not going to turn something up that could halt the project. Something else to note, in the EAW comments were some traffic comments from Carver County Public Works. We anticipated most of them. Since this project has started, there's been obviously a lot of work put into the JCP project. We know a lot more about that project now than they did when they did the traffic study for this project. We also, if you think about the process we went through when we were platting Monroe from Meridian Fields and the Quick Trip, we were so thoughtful about the amount of traffic that intersection was going to see and what it needed to look like. So 2 things to note for the traffic is that Monroe and Ironwood will both have double lefts turning onto Jonathan Carver Parkway once the project is completed, which will get traffic out not only of this project, but any project west of Jonathan Carver Parkway at that time. Also, based on the first traffic study that was completed for for this project, it was mostly assumptions based on the JCP project, where now we have concrete information. You'll see throughout the traffic study that's included in the EAW, there are several areas that look a little bit questionable if the project is going to work or not. Several of the intersections have failing marks should nothing happen with the JCP project. The combination of the Monroe Ironwood double lefts with some timing of the intersections, as well as the JCP project, largely alleviate those concerns. We had a conference call with Carver County Public Works just to talk through this, since it is something that is so important and is going to probably be one of the triggers that people will talk about often, coming in with 344 more units. Something else I want to note is that this project is set to be staged for 7 years. So the EAW right now says that they're going to start construction spring 2020, which is right now. And knowing the amount of work that they have to complete, I would say they might be really, really lucky if they did some grading this fall. So I would say their first year of construction is probably spring 2021, bringing their project to completion spring 2028. So by then, the John Carver Parkway project will be a distant, fond memory for all of us, hopefully, and the corridor will be able to handle the traffic from this project. Also, something else that is said a lot in the comments and responses is that the permit will be applied for if necessary. So as part of the EAW, they have to identify every permit that could be required, which is on the screen now. So you'll see it's an extensive list. Should they be required, the developer will apply for them, the city will monitor in typical fashion. But again, it's pretty common that someone just says, hey, if this happens, you'll need our permit. Great, we'll apply for it at that time. So again, tonight's review is essentially the determination of if the EAW is complete and if an EIS is required. So it's the findings of fact, conclusion, and record of decision. Should we choose to move forward tonight, the next step is to forward the EAW with all comments received back to the agencies. So it's their opportunity to look at our responses to say they addressed it, looks good, we're going to continue moving forward with the project. After that is done, the EAW process was then complete. At that point, the developer can choose should they want to move forward with the land use approval. So next would be the typical planning process, annexation, preliminary plat, where we start to dig into a lot of these comments to figure some of them out beyond just comment noted, will be addressed during platting. That's going to be a heavy lift for this project due to the number of units, the size, and then some of the things we learned from the EAW. Rezoning will also be required. You all know when a project comes into the city, it defaults to ag first, agriculture, so for rezoning, and then final plat. So typical planning process still required. Tonight is just the decision on the findings of fact, conclusion, and record of decision. We'll open it up for questions.
All right. Any questions? Go ahead, Christy.
I want to thank Erin. Some of these things that she noted were questions that I had earlier today when I talked to her on the phone, so thank you for clarifying those again. I also wanted to have you clarify, maybe if it's not Erin, it's Brent, that the construction, obviously it said spring 2020, that's a little aggressive for, it is spring 2020. But even if they wanted to start next year, can you talk about what it will look like for how they will reach their development area if County Road 11, Jonathan Carver, is closed down for construction? Already going to be a big headache there. So how are we going to mitigate that with construction traffic for a development at the same time?
Yep, good question. So when we were platting Meridian Fields, which I'm circling now, which is the DR Horton project just south of 212, we preserved Town Road here, which is also the access to the Song property. So Town Road is how the Song family right now accesses the farm site. So this will still be maintained. You can get off of Highway 212, take the frontage road that leads you both to Town Road and the Flag House, but this could be their construction access. So something we'll think about, definitely. There also might be some options if they need something more complex or heavy equipment. town road being the preferred since it wouldn't be used by any residents.
I think all my other questions were addressed. Thank you.
Anybody else with any other questions? Go ahead, Lori.
I do. And thanks, Erin, too, for presenting this and making it accessible for us to see those comments. Two things is, and I realize it's total concept plan, so if it's something where it's like we don't know yet, I'll accept that answer. Is they plan to stagger the project over 7 years. What if something like just way changes in their business and they just try to helm this out in 3 years? Or I mean, do we have any control? Do we have any input with that?
So something that's different about Summergate from typical builders that we've seen in the past couple of years is that D.R. Horton, Lennar, MI, or not MI, D.R. Horton and Lennar typically come in, they buy the lots and then they develop them. Summergate is similar to Trinity that did Meadows at Spring Creek, where they develop the lots and then they sell them. So a project could be filled with D.R. Horton, it could be a custom builder, it could be Lennar, it could be a mix of all of them together. So they're a little bit different where they produce the lots. So based on like the infrastructure that needs to go in, I think that largely sets the staging. So to put in this number of streets within a couple years is going to be pretty expensive. They won't be tied to the 7 years. We won't be able to say like, hold up, the market is great, we're only in year 4, you have to slow down. But I think largely infrastructure costs are what drive some of that early timing that they tell us, just so we don't think everything is going to happen at once. So we won't have any control over it if the market demands more product and builders would like to get in there quicker. That definitely would be an option. But right now, that's just what they've given us for a timeline.
Okay. And then I would think on the other like extreme where if this really stretches out for whatever reasons they need way longer, we just have to let that process go. Kind of a natural progression. We can't tie them to like an end date or like are we at risk of having a half-built development? And if something just really major changes in like 5-10 years.
So should they start the infrastructure and stop, and it inhibits another project from happening, the developers agreement allows us to hold a letter of credit for 125% of project costs. So should something happen where they start the work and then stop, and we needed to continue, we can use mechanisms through the developers agreement to go in and finish their work. Obviously, that's not ideal. Largely, a good example would be 2008, when there were probably utilities in different areas that were just in the ground, but largely being damaged because they weren't completed. So we would have the ability to go in and complete the work. Not something we want to do, but it is something that we do have a little bit of control over.
Okay, thanks. And then based on the drawing, the name here, Summergate, I was going to ask, but you answered it too. I think it would be really exciting for our community to have that option for custom builders to buy the lot and present their own product.
All right. Any other questions? Glenn, anything from you? All right. I see you shaking your head. Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. If we don't have any other questions or comments, and I don't have any, keeping in mind that this is, that we're not looking at the land use review, that this is just the EAW that we're looking at tonight. Does anyone have a motion?
Courtney, I can make a motion to adopt resolution 111-2020, adopting the findings of fact, conclusion, and record of decision for the Timber Creek Environmental Assessment Worksheet.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Mock.
I will second that.
All right, and a second by Councilmember Henry. Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mott,
Aye, Christie Mott.
Councilmember Sayer,
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right. Thank you. Motion carries. Let's see, moving on. Let's see, it is almost 7 o'clock, but why don't we, let's go ahead with the Carver County CDA grant agreement. Ms. Smith.
Are you still on my screen share? Sorry.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we are reviewing a CDA grant agreement for the second Carver Crossing building that we've discussed a couple times as a group. So we've seen so far a concept level plan for the second CDA building. So just south of the existing building, just north of Oak Tree, off Hartwell Drive. The proposed project that we've been talking about for a couple months now is an additional 103 units split between general occupancy and senior housing for the next CDA project. So through this process, this area has been platted. This project has been planned for several years. It was a master development site with Upper Hills, Carver Station, and the first Carver Crossing building. So tonight we are discussing a grant agreement from the CDA, grant written by the CDA. I'll talk through some of those logistics as we work through the project. So the CDA has a Community Growth Partnership Initiative grant. The city has previously received this grant for the bus garage, the current Carver Ridge site. So that allowed for site cleanup. The grant is run through the CDA. So this feels a little bit strange that it's a CDA grant for a CDA project. This has been vetted heavily by the city attorney. He did review the grant agreement, provided a lot of feedback, and has come to the conclusion that we're at a point where the grant agreement is acceptable for both the city and the CDA. So the CDA requested that the city apply for the grant on their behalf. The dollars would be used towards site work, so things like grading, storage retention pond. The project was awarded $85,000 by the CDA. So there's no grant required, and the city would not contract any of the work. So we would not be the group that has the contracts for any of the site work that would be completed. It all would be done by the CDA. Something to note is that we have no additional applications at this time. So at the most recent update, I gave you some information that the project is roughly $16 million, and they have a $4 million shortfall right now. Nothing has changed on that since this point. This does not bridge, obviously, that $4 million gap that they have. It's just another mechanism that they could add for their funding option. So it does not get them to that finish line where they're coming to us with a complete application, but gets them a little bit closer. So again, we don't have any active applications at this time, so nothing's being considered for the second building. It's strictly the grant agreement. So the action tonight would be to approve the grant agreement, allow them to have the $85,000 for site work as they continue to search for additional funding for the project. I'll open it up for questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Glenn Henry. So the CDA is going to give, or they are asking us for $85,000. Let me rephrase that. The CDA is going to grant the CDA 85 grand, but we have to make the grant application for them?
Correct. So they asked us to apply to the CDA on their behalf.
Okay. Larry, do we have any culpability in this?
Well, Mr. Henry, this is a little unusual.
A little.
And I can tell you that the original agreement the CDA presented was problematic. I understand that the goal is the CDA trying to use a grant that the program is a grant to communities to attempt to go into their own project. The city's legal obligations are the obligations under the grant agreement, which I think as Smith has indicated, I've edited considerably. So that the city can do this. I mean, I acknowledge that it's unusual, but I think the agreement as revised is enforceable. And I mean, I think if there's, we can't control how the CDA administers its own program. They asked the city to do this legally the way the agreement is drafted, or it's been revised, the city can do it.
Okay. That's all I got.
All right. Any other questions?
Mayor Johnson?
Go ahead. Oh, thanks, Christy. I would.
Thank you. I'm not sure who the right person to answer this question is. How often does this happen that the CDA, okay, I have to back up. The grant money that the CDA has to give away, where does that grant money come from originally? How do they acquire $85,000 in grant money?
I don't know the answer to that.
Anyone else? Mr. Harris, Brent?
This is Larry. I don't know. I know that this is part of a larger pool of several $100,000 in grants that were awarded by the CDA in this cycle, but I don't know the source of the funding.
This is Brent. I'd echo that. Other than I'd also add though that the primary source of the Carver County CDA's revenue is a tax levy. I don't know what the origin of these funds are, but their primary revenue generator is a tax levy. But that's something that I go to the CDA and ask for funds.
Oh, Brent, you cut out at the end there.
Oh.
So I know what he said. We can inquire with CDA and get the source of the funds. Something else to note, the entire grant, this program has $400,000 in it. So there are 4 projects that are being funded through this round. So there's a project really similar in Laconia. There's a small business project, I think, in Watertown, and then there's a project in Chaska as well.
Okay, so then another question one of you may or may not be able to answer. So outside of the CDA applying for their own grants, who else would apply for a grant from them? It
Sure.
is CDA.
So the project in Chaska, the city of Chaska applied.
Okay.
So any community within the CDA's Carver County. So for the projects in Watertown, it was the small business expansion that asked for the grant funds too. So anyone in Carver County, they have some pretty strict requirements. It needs to be like based on community development, provide job creation, affordable housing. So they have some guidelines, but any project that fits within Carver County could apply for this grant.
So when I've thought about this, and now understanding who else can apply for these grants and how this works, it feels very strange to me for the CDA to collect this grant money and then turn around and give it to themselves. So I'm having trouble kind of swallowing how that works. And I appreciate that you guys did the work and that was asked to go through this, but it just seems like a strange marriage to me, to apply for your own grant to then receive it. I guess I can leave it there for now in case someone else has any other comments.
This is Larry. I do want to make one comment in response to what Ms. Mock is saying. The CDA did not apply for this grant. The city of Carver did. The CDA requested that the city of Carver do that, and the council, Aaron, I don't remember the exact meeting, but it was about two and a half months ago, adopted a resolution authorizing the grant application to be submitted by the city to the CDA. So once that grant application was in, CDA process they followed, elected to award the grant to the city. So the applicant was the city, the grant funds will go to the city, but the funds will be dispersed under the terms of the grant agreement for the CDA's project. Provided the CDA's project gets launched and it gets approved by the city, there's a fairly significant disclaimer in the grant agreement that the city's not obligated to approve the project.
Does that help, Christy?
Yeah, thank you, Larry. Yes, and I realized that we had approved looking at actually writing it to see if it would come through earlier. Just digging in and looking at it now that it's been awarded, those comments were that. So I will stop for a minute and let anyone else have talk here.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments? Let's see, Glenn shaking his head, no. Let's see, Lori, no. Joy is shaking her head no. Okay, with that I would entertain a motion to approve the Community Growth Partnership Initiative Grant Agreement with Carver County CDA. So I will make a motion to approve the Community Growth Partnership Initiative Grant Agreement with the Carver County Community Development Agency. So there's a motion by Mayor Johnson.
I'll second that.
A second by Councilmember McKnight. Mr. Mayor, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry,
Aye, Glenn Henry.
Councilmember Mott,
Nay, Christy Mock.
Councilmember Sayer,
Nay, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight,
Aye, Joy McKnight.
and Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. Motion passes. All right, let's go back to.
Excuse me, Mayor Johnson.
Yep,
Can you just for the record state the tally on the vote?
sure.
for the
It
record?
was 3-2 in favor. Is that what you're looking for,
Thank you.
Brent?
Yep.
Okay. With that, let's go back to the public hearing for the cable communications franchise applications. It's item number 6.1 on our agenda. So, Mr. Blum.
Mayor, members of the council, we are here this evening on this matter to provide an opportunity for public hearing and comment or say any potential applicants for cable TV franchises. If you recall, council approved the beginning of the process 5 to 6 weeks ago with the publications that occurred inviting potential franchisees to apply for a cable TV franchise. We have in fact received materials from two potential service providers, one being Comcast, who's already operating in the area, and the other is Jamrod. We are in process of evaluating potential language for franchise ordinance tonight.
Wait, can you wait a second? So, I'm sorry, I put myself on mute, and I think you guys must be getting Ron from. Okay, sorry about that. Just can you go back 2 sentences?
Sure. So, was I muted for what I?
Just 2 sentences worth.
Okay.
I just hit it. Sorry.
So, sorry about that. I'll try to track that and say, in summary, we have received materials from two.
Sorry to
potential
interrupt.
franchises.
Wait, sorry. Go ahead.
Is there a way that we can copyright that mute button for city attorneys? Question for Larry Harris.
Sorry, go ahead.
Use a little bit of humor. At any rate, so we are in process for the cable TV franchise application and ordinance drafting. Tonight is an opportunity for either the potential franchisees, members of the public to comment. And noticed that several weeks ago, that was before obviously the current state of affairs in regards to the state of emergency came into play. Started that process, following along in the process, essentially according to our. So this point, we would open a public hearing, invite anyone who is participating in the tool that we have for people to participate remotely or if they were to be present. So there's nobody here, Council Chambers at the moment, but anyone could certainly be potential franchisees. So,
So with that, we'll open the public hearing?
yes.
Okay. I will open the public hearing. Those wishing to address the city council should ask the mayor to be recognized. When recognized, please state your name and address for the record. After all comments are received, the public hearing will be closed. No further comments on this issue will be received at this meeting. So we will once again allow, if there's anybody on the video who wants to make the public comments right now, please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll give it a minute or two to have the web broadcast catch up with where we're at on the Zoom.
Mayor Johnson, my name is Christine Anderson. I'm Jaguar Communications, one of the franchisee applications. So if you're ready to hear from us, I'm happy to address the council. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Anderson?
Mayor Johnson, can I ask if you're still taking just public comment?
Well, I am, Christy, let's just give it like 10 more seconds for public comment.
Absolutely, thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor Johnson.
Yep.
I think it may be appropriate if Jaguar or anybody from Comcast wants to provide comments during the public hearing, that they can do so as well as a part of the comments. Is that appropriate, Ron?
I believe so. And certainly the president and now is their opportunity if they want to supplement their application in any way. If we do that. And of course, we are making ourselves available at the city attorney's office for any detailed discussion of what its negotiation is.
All right, so Ms. Anderson, if you have any comments, please feel free to make them.
Thank you, Mayor Johnston, members of the council. As I said, my name is Christine Anderson. I'm the in-house attorney at Jaguar, and Mr. Merrick, I will second the motion for having mute button applicable to all attorneys, regardless. I will also preface this with the caveat that I am working from a remote office, also known as my dining room, and my managing partner tonight is a very grouchy elderly pug who thinks she's a Doberman. So if she should happen to join us in the background, you have my apologies. So Jaguar is based out of Owatonna. We serve a lot of rural area, but also parts of the western metro area. You may be familiar with Jaguar because we were very involved with Carver County and continue to be in terms of the Carver fiber ring. We were actually approached by a particular neighborhood in the city of Carver about building out to that area to provide service, which is sort of how our franchise discussions with the city, and that's what brings us here today. We have a reputation for serving unserved areas or unserved parts of areas, kind of on the border. I often joke that we're known for bringing fiber to the cows. We run fiber optic directly to the premises. So we're not a situation where we run fiber to a node and then it sort of spokes out traditionally. We bring fiber cable right to the premises. In addition to offering video, we offer internet service and telephone service, and then we do a few other things as well. But as far as residential customers, that's what our offering would be. As I shared in the application, we are in the process of being acquired by another provider. We're going to continue to operate independently as a subsidiary of that provider, but that provider brings with it a whole host of additional capital and hopefully ultimately will result in an expansion of our channel offerings, which are already very generous. And we're very excited about the opportunity to come to the city and provide another option for residents there who either currently are not served by Comcast or may want a competitive option. with that, I'd open it up to any questions that anybody has, because you can read what we submitted and you don't need me to waste your time. But I'm happy to supplement it with anything you'd like to know. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, so I have a question. It might be just a little outside of the franchise agreement, but I would say that easily top 5 questions that I get from residents of Carver is, when is Jaguar Communications, and specifically your high-speed fiber line, coming to Carver? It sounds like if you request it and make enough phone calls, it'll come. Is there a larger, more detailed, and probably offline, but plan that you can share with us, that we can share with residents as to, yes, they're coming and they'll be available in these neighborhoods in these years, and kind of a future plan?
Mayor Johnson, what I can tell you is, well, I hate to say I don't know. The honest answer is I don't know. We have far more communities that want us to come than we can serve in any given construction season. I can tell you that with the acquisition by MetroNet, one of the reasons that's very positive for Jaguar and for residents of Carver is because of the increased capital and the increased ability to build. And so projects will be happening faster once they join us. They didn't choose to acquire Jaguar because it was a struggling company. Just the opposite was true. They came into Rochester last year, and they basically figured out that either they were going to have to compete with us, which is very difficult in our markets, or they were going to need to buy us. And so they just kept, coming knocking on the door until we finally said yes. And so that will allow us to build faster. But we have to build in ways that make economic sense, right? Because that's the only way that we can keep the prices at a level that are competitive and fair to customers. So the way that happens is necessarily by interest, where we have an opportunity to try and find some anchor customers. We do sometimes, if a particular area is looking to bring us particular neighborhoods or anchor customers, will maybe contribute a little bit more in terms of contribution and native construction to help make things economically viable. But one thing we're very, very good at, because we're small and because we're local, is that we're good at creative solutions. We never want to turn anybody down. So we'll move in as quickly as we can find a way to make it economically viable. That's also part of the reason that we don't propose a whole city build out all at once, because particularly coming in when there's an established provider, it makes it very difficult from an economic perspective to do that. And so that's what causes a lot of cities to only have one provider. A competitive provider can't come in because it's not economically viable to build out the whole city. So what we do instead is sort of do it as a domino effect. So as we start moving in and there's more interest, we'll expand and expand and expand. Carver's not that big a city, so realistically, once we get there, I don't think it'll take us very long to build out. Certainly the movement toward, like I said, the inquiry came late last year. It's on our radar. We're obviously submitting this, so we're not talking about years from now, but in terms of how quickly it would happen, I can't guarantee how quickly it would come to certain neighborhoods. I think the build would start in the very near future.
Got it. Thank you. Just one super quick follow-up question. What, if you know, what area of Carver was that made the request that got you guys into town? And if that's not the first area of Carver where you're going to be starting to branch out into, what area are you starting with first?
Off the top of my head, I don't recall the specific. Yeah, I may be able to find that while we're here in the public hearing. But as far as where we would start building, I don't have information about that.
That's fair.
Map girl.
Got it. Fair enough.
Mayor?
Yep.
I know this because it was someone who lives on my street that made the request, so it's up in Spring Creek Drive. That's just a coincidence, not a plan.
Okay. Thank you. Any other?
I wasn't going to throw you under the bus, Mr. Merrick, but I did know that it was in your neighborhood.
See, we don't want to mute all cities. You're a good one.
Councilmember McKnight.
assume that Jaguar would not just provide residential service, but also business service?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's just my only question.
Any other questions? Ms. Mock?
Brent, when I'm looking at the cable franchise requirements in our packet, so the first page of it says key requirements dash fees, and then it says 5% cap. It also talks about requiring non-monetary in-kind contributions towards maximum 5% fee. Can you explain, or maybe it's better that Christine explains, what that means exactly?
I'm going to defer to Ron on that.
Okay.
That particular slide, Mayor and Council, is in reference to if we were to require a fee in the franchise ordinance. This time I understand that it's the preference of the council to not have a fee. But if we were to require a fee, however, then we would be limited to that ransom. That ransom was recently clarified by the FCC in the 2019 memo in regards to essentially taking little bits and pieces of other ways to get something out of the ordinance that could be counted towards the 5%. So it's really further limiting what you can get out of it. Since we're not asking for a fee of any kind, it's not going to be going to our present considerations.
Did you say that last sentence? It was cutting out. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
So since we're not asking for a fee, that particular part of the slide is informational only. In other words, it is limiting on us if we were to ask for a fee. And since we're not asking for a fee, there's nothing to towards that 5% section.
Any other questions? All right. And I don't think we had any other members of the public queue up. Brent, I don't know if you've heard any.
Let me check. You just want to hold it again, just call for any other comments?
Sure. So
a minute.
we'll give another minute for probably the last minute before we close the public hearing, but we'll give it another minute for public comments. All right, it has been a minute, and I don't believe that we've received any public comment. So with that, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion to close the public hearing by Councilmember Mock,
I'll second that.
and a second by Councilmember Henry. Mr. Mayor, can you please do a roll call vote?
Councilmember Henry?
Hi, Glenn Henry. Did you have a question, Joy?
No.
Councilmember Mock?
Aye, Christie Mock.
Councilmember Sayer?
Hi, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight?
Hi, Joy McNabb.
Mayor Johnson?
Aye, Courtney Johnson. All right, motion carries. Let's see, so council, any further comments, questions on this? Mr. Plum, anything you want to clarify, anything else? Okay, all right. Let's see. that is it for that item, right? We don't need to vote on this, Brett?
Correct.
Mayor.
Ron, would you mind sharing with the council just the next steps that they can expect going forward?
Sure. Mayor and members of the council, we're on track with our original expectations to consider the ordinance language that has been proposed by the potential franchisees. We had originally contemplated that going possibly into May. And at the point where we're full presenting what we think is the most to a final product, we will present that to the it's for their comment and to the council.
All right, thank you. All right, so moving forward, as we're kind of hopscotching through the agenda here, that brings us to item number 10, communications, which is where we'll go through a couple of our work session items. So 10.1 is Jonathan Carver Parkway Improvement Project Update. Mr. Lannis.
Before I hand it over to Dan, I just wanted to kind of give the council an overview tonight. So the Jonathan Carver Parkway project is similar in a lot of ways to the City Hall project. This is a generational type of project for the community, thinking about an improvement that's going to run out 30, 40, 50 years, at least how you look at Jonathan Carver Parkway compared to what it looks like now. And so that said, in a lot of ways, it's quite a bit more complex than a City Hall, which is a building and a size and different rooms. There are many components of this project, which include the main corridors, some local street improvements, utilities, what we talked about previously with landscaping. We also have a project partner in Carver County. And so what we wanted to do tonight, even though that we've talked about this in a series of conversations with the council over many months, and frankly years since the corridor study started, I wanted to have Dan Lannis run through the project, soup to nuts, and provide an opportunity for the council to provide some additional direction, some areas that you like, areas of concern, and then providing some clarification, because as we move forward into this project, significant changes are going to be harder and harder to make, especially with where we're at with the schedule and having a project partner. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
And I am going to share my screen here. Can everybody see the first slide of the presentation?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Well, like Brent said, we have a fair amount to cover tonight, so I'll try and I'll buzz through it. As always, feel free to ask questions along the way. What we are going to be trying to cover here is a brief update on the schedule, where we stand in the project timeline. We'll give you a brief overview of the staging summary. Again, where it stands, you've seen some alternatives presented, and ultimately I'll be talking about where it's trending right now as far as the preferred alternative. We'll talk quite a bit about landscape and wayfinding process, basically bringing back the steering committee's input to some options for you to take a look at. And then ultimately, hopefully we get to the point of us selecting a preferred direction to guide the process moving forward. And then of course, we're going to walk through some next steps, what to expect. We'll also give you a cost summary date and overall project here with the information we have today. So we'll start with schedule. This goes back, as Brent mentioned, a long time. But the key things to take away out of this chart here is obviously the study identified the needs. That was identifying what you actually needed to solve some of the traffic issues long term. Preliminary design, that gray bar, is effectively completed at this point in time. What that really means is the configuration is set for the project. Changes at this point have a kind of a snowball effect. It's a lot harder to modify things when you get into the final design phase. That doesn't mean all opportunities are lost. You certainly can make changes here and there, but it gets a lot more difficult at this point. So largely, configuration is set for the layout and geometry, pending any last comments here. So current key next steps are going to be construction staging, confirmation, JPA cost splits, JPA meaning joint powers agreement, working out the cost splits based on the estimates and the agreement terms between the city and the county. Landscaping, setting the direction for landscaping, which is important to the final design process because landscaping doesn't form final design in many respects for concrete and all kinds of things that go into these plans. So it is something that it's the appropriate time to make decisions on landscaping. And then, of course, the right-of-way process, which is a 9-month process in most cases here. So that's going to begin with county leading that here. So bidding is expected to happen late fall, November, December. If it gets pushed back a little bit, still it'd be hopeful it'd be January, February. Construction starting April, May. Single year is the goal at this point. So construction staging, you've probably seen most of this, so I'll try and keep this brief, but stage 1, spring of 2021 would be intended to really start up the project with construction under traffic, work on both sides of the road. So that would be, the trigger on that would be before school is out. At that point, traffic would be maintained on County Road 11. That'd probably be the April, May-ish duration, with barricades set up and barrels on each side of the road. Some work happening in the boulevard. Stage 2 is the big moment that you've been hearing about. That's the closure of County Road 11. Now, what's important to note on that is that's going to be contractually tied to school closing or school being out. It's estimated to be about 8 to 10 weeks, but obviously weather can influence that. So it should just note that after school is out, it would be closed through traffic until the work between Ironwood and Dahlgreen is completed. They will have contract requirements in there that incentivize completion dates and such. But the movements at this point here, you'll notice traffic is still open at Monroe. To some of the early questions about construction access to Song, Monroe would still be an active intersection. The hard closure is actually at Ironwood. So from Monroe to Ironwood, you'd see construction under traffic. You'll see a lot of activity between Monroe and Ironwood, but it wouldn't technically be closed for this duration. There would be some short-term closures for putting in the pedestrian underpass between Monroe and Ironwood. However, that would have to be coordinated. That is to be defined further in the staging plans. But during this stage, you have all movements going across County Road 11 and under Ironwood, and all movements going across Dahlgreen. But the through traffic has been diverted. Stage 2A is about a 4-week intersection closure at Dahlgreen. That's to build the roundabout intersection. You'll see the blue arrow down there at Dahlgreen is indicating the movement to be maintained throughout that construction. So effectively, just a moving access that would be maintained throughout the construction of it. It'd be kind of construction under traffic, but access would be maintained at all times for that business and for fire service and such. So, but the cross movement would be down, and ultimately it'd be heavily constructed under traffic. That'd be about a 4-week intersection closure to allow them to construct most portions of the roundabout. So the detour is a big moment in this project. If County Road 11 is fully closed, a detour would have to be in place. The current detour route is shown here in green. That is a very significant element to be looking at right now, just because if 30% of the traffic diverts from County Road 11, that's a lot of traffic going on this road. And so we're having the county take a look at the traffic modeling. What would that look like, sending a couple thousand vehicles downtown? How do the stop control intersections handle that? What's it going to look like? And so we're trying to get a better feel for what to expect for traffic operating through this portion of the city. You have a certain percentage detour. We're also taking a look at truck rerouting from Mueller's Pit. again, that's something that's to be coordinated in staging plans. Some discussions with dealers is going to be ongoing to try and navigate this. And so where you can see things trending is there's a lot of details to be worked out, but that is happening. So the staging plans are being developed with this general concept in mind, with a lot of things to be ironed out. So accesses we've maintained for residents, businesses, Carver Elementary and Fire Station at all times. That's a construction contract requirement. And so that's just all times is the statement in different ways is the caveat. It happens in a number of different ways, but it's going to be a construction requirement. And then city plan, because there's going to be a lot of traffic diverting onto different roadways during a closure such as this, the plan is to include some temporary speed bumps on local streets, 4th, 6th, Ironwood, Edgebrook, and Spring Creek Drive. What that looks like is something you put out in the street and gets people to check their speeds driving down the street and pick them up again when the project's over. So, that's one of the ways to try and deal with traffic that's been rerouted with a detour. So there's also going to be a regional component to the detour. Some advanced signage would hopefully guide people around the project area that are just trying to get up to 212. Let them know of the closure and try and minimize traffic that would be congested in the downtown area. So that would route regional traffic on Highway 50 up to 43. There'd be signage there. Along that same line here, there's going to be intent to reroute people as far back as Jordan, with some signage review occurring at 169 County Road 9 in Jordan to try and give people a very advanced indication that there's a road closed up ahead and they have an opportunity to take and choose other routes. Final stage of construction after the summer, when school's back in operation, would be this stage, which is effectively construction under traffic again. So at that point, what you'd see is, they'd be still working in boulevards or constructing certain elements, but traffic would be going down the corridor, but possibly down to one lane. This is a 4-lane segment that's being built, so they might open it up to 1 lane in each direction with the center median closed off, for example, and the inner lanes of the highway closed off, and then they might flip it over and move to the inner 2 lanes next to the median and close the outer 2 lanes, and they might have lanes closed. So that's how you would expect that third stage to occur, depending on what they can get in the middle of the summer. So with that, if there's any questions, you can chime in or hold them to the end. Like, we would be moving into the landscape wayfinding update, which is going to have a fair amount of content here. And I'm going to turn this over to Aaron to give you a brief summary of what the wayfinding or the landscape committee had to say about visioning for the corridor and a little bit more about the whole process. I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Before we jump into Aaron, Council, do you have any questions for Dan on the construction staging or the detours, etc.? That's a pretty critical point. So before those details become less vivid in your mind, just wanted to check in to see if there's a conversation you wanted to have with them.
Christy, go ahead. I see you raising your hand.
Thank you. Dan, when you were talking about speed bumps, you said, I believe it was 4th and 6th Street. And where are those going to be placed on 4th and 6th? And why were those roads chosen but not Main Street?
Okay, Brent, I could perhaps defer to you a little bit on that. This at this point is some early concepts. The staging plan is yet to be defined and finalized, so comments like that will be taken forward. But Brent, could you chime in a little bit on that early thinking on that?
Your Councilmember Mott, can you repeat the question just so I have it clear?
Sure. So when on this slide it says that they're going to be putting those temporary speed bumps on local streets, including 4th, 6th, Ironwood. Where are you planning on placing those? Like for 4th Street, 6th Street, at the bottom, at the top, and then most of our traffic is going to be coming on Main Street, but there's no intent to have them on Main Street.
So two pieces there. We haven't determined specifically where on those side streets or local streets we put them. We've had to advocate for all the streets there are listed as city streets, and so the county is controlling 40. So we, in a lot of ways, would have to agree with the county, or they'd have to take on that same position since it's their quote unquote their road. So they'd have to agree with that strategy to slow traffic down. We'd advocate for that, but and we can if that's something the council wants us to do. But we know for sure that we have the ability to dictate how traffic is managed on local city streets. So that'd be a great comment for staff to have it. We wanted to see speed bumps on Main/County Road 40, and then if the council at some point we can bring a plan back to the council on where we propose to place the speed bumps, and then you can sign off on that location or give us some suggestions on alternate locations.
Okay, and then I have one more suggestion. I would suggest that when you're making the right-hand turn from Broadway to Main, that during this heavy traffic time, that we put up a temporary stop sign so that it's a four-way stop. I used to live very close to that intersection, and on a normal day with traffic, people take that corner pretty fast, and they really pick up speed as they're going by. So I think it would be very advantageous to us to put that as a four-way stop so that it does slow people down, especially now that they're going to be on a detour, which probably means they're a little more frustrated, they've spent a little more time on the road and are wanting to, get home as fast as they can. So that would be something even more than speed bumps on Main Street. I would like to have that temporarily be a four-way stop. I'd like to see that go to the county for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for the comment, and that is, to your point, one of the reasons we'd like to see all the numbers down there with this detour in place. That's when we get the data back, more to come on the best way to operate this and what's gonna make this operate safely and functionally. If the numbers get high enough, you get into situations where you need flagging and things to that nature during certain times of day. So all that is going to be evaluated. We'll bring some more information back as the data comes in, and we'll take that comment forward.
When you say as the data comes in, is this preliminary data that you're waiting on, or is this actual data after the construction started?
Nope, this is advanced data. What we're asking them to do is take a look at the current intersections right now and put a certain amount of rerouted traffic from County Road on those intersections, run a model, and they run a traffic model and they say, all right, this is the type of backup you'd expect under these conditions. And from that, you take a look at different operational options that you'd have to either get the traffic through or make changes down to the intersections. So it's actually happening within the next couple weeks, hopefully, and then we'll review it and make some comments.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, with the four-way stop there, I'd like to see that as soon as we can to the start date of the project. So if that road closes and then we start, I don't want it to come as a surprise. I would like that four-way or whatever traffic measure comes into place to be there the first time someone has to take that detour that they may not have taken before, so they don't have to take a detour and then learn something different as it goes on, and then we end up having accidents.
Absolutely, that's a very, very applicable point. The traffic control should be there the way it's going to be, and ultimately it has to be built into the staging plan. So you'll ultimately have an opportunity to say, yep, this is how it's going to be constructed. This is the staging plan, and that's going to be the final plan approval step of this whole project.
Okay, thank you.
There's two things to add related to that. One of the primary pieces, and I apologize, Dan, if you've covered this already, but should County Road 11 be when it's closed, one of the primary concerns that we've flagged to the county is the amount of truck traffic from Mueller's Pit that would be going through the downtown. Not that that's a bad thing, but we just want to understand what that volume is and be prepared to talk about expectations that the council has, the county has, Mueller's, residents, etc. So we'll bring that data back. The other thing that the council may want to discuss or just have as an item to talk about in the future, but if there is additional traffic on Broadway, which we're expecting. One of the changes that the council made a number of years ago, and I'm not advocating a mirrored response, but we've always had a challenge with traffic turning from 3rd Street onto Broadway, just with the angled parking. And in the area of Harvey's, that was turned into a one-way. We might want to look at an alternative or temporary piece for 3rd Street East. And I'm not advocating for a one-way, but there could be a number of alternatives the council might want to consider because that's a dangerous kind of area to peek out and turn on the Broadway as it is. And so something that we can go back and talk to Dan and his team in the county about different ways to handle that during construction with the additional traffic volumes.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Absolutely.
Dan, what are the chances any traffic that would be coming out of Jordan on what? Is that 50, I think? Down the Carver Park, when they cross the river and they're coming up to 40, what are the chances we can funnel some of that traffic over to 43 in East Union and run it out to 212 that way and just totally bypass downtown Carver?
Are you referring to this slide?
Yes.
Yep, that's being investigated, and it would be part of the staging design to lay out the various detours. This is one of them that is being considered strongly to route traffic around the area.
Okay, and then as far as speed bumps on 6th Street, if those were accidentally left permanently, I would not object to that. Anyway, that was my only concern about funneling as much of the truck traffic around Carver than putting it right through downtown.
All right.
Hey, Dan, I just had one thing that I wanted to clarify. Can you go back to the slide that has all of the different phases of the staging? I have a question about phase or stage 2A. I assume that because of the naming convention, that will take place during the 8 to 10 weeks where that section is completely closed down. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically what they're saying is there would be a 4-week window where they'd close that intersection down. Yeah, so
which will coincide with
It would happen concurrently with the rest of the closure.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Yeah.
Joy, go ahead, Joy. Sorry.
No problem. So I just want to second Christy Mock's request for the stop sign at Broadway and Main. Love that idea. And I guess I know we're looking at multiple different detours. I think it'll be important to get the signage and the communication right. And I think that we want to make sure if people are trying to get to 212, they take that detour on 43, and that the local detour is not to get onto 212 at all. It is local access only. I think that's the intention here, but I think if we can emphasize that through signage, because I mean, technically that's for people to get to the residences, the downtown, the businesses, maybe downtown Chaska. It's not to get on the freeway.
Yeah, and there's a number of different techniques that will have to be considered in the staging plan. There's ultimately the reality that people are going to take the path that they feel is most convenient for them.
Sure.
I mean, so if it gets to the point where we're laying this out, sometimes you put up signage that says expect extreme delays, and people will make a very quick turn. So it just we'll have to balance that out with what we're trying to do operationally to keep the downtown somewhat free flowing and make sure that we get the traffic split. So, yeah, good point.
Thanks.
Tricky, Dan, honest.
I am fine with whatever we have to say on those signs to keep people. All right, ready to move on? Let's do it.
Wherever you are.
Yep, let's go ahead, Dan.
Okay. So I will turn this over to Aaron to talk about the a steering committee for landscape.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Council. If you'll remember at our 2019 strategic plan meeting, a directive from the City Council was to develop a steering committee to work on landscaping, wayfinding, and branding for the corridor. So that was part of this project. We had a really fantastic group of people. There's some nice photos of them to come. The main goals of this group was to gather input both from residents and business owners. We were pretty specific about the group of people we pulled together, so it was important that we got diverse stakeholders for the project, not 10 people from the same neighborhood, 10 people that shared the same opinion, 10 people that use the corridor the same way. So we solicited for a resident that lived in town for more than 10 years, a member of the HBC, a member of the Planning Commission, the Parks Commission, a master gardener. We lucked out and actually had 2. We were looking for a resident that lived on the corridor, a business owner on the corridor, and then a parent with a child at Carver Elementary. So we were looking for that diverse group of people who use the corridor really differently. It was interesting to get perspective from Travis Gilbertson, the chiropractor in Carver Square, compared to someone who uses the corridor to get across to bring their kid to Carver Elementary. So the goal of the group too was to set the tone and provide input. So it was a really fantastic group of people. I think we came out with some really great ideas about landscaping and wayfinding. It was also important through this process to create some champions for the project. This project was going to be hard, it's going to be long. There's going to be some feedback that probably isn't great. So to have 10 people from the community that can say, hey, I had some stake in this. I'm really proud of the project that we came up with. Felt like it was important to get a group of people behind the project early and to make some of these decisions. Slide. So here is the group working. Again, we met a few times and talked through several different options. They gave us a lot of really good feedback. It was fun just to see the group work too. Largely they didn't know each other, so it was fun to watch them build relationships around the project that started out as something kind of conceptual to them, but then they were able to make some really concrete decisions on the direction that they wanted to see. Slide. So some visions that they had from their first meeting, they wanted to develop a corridor that was unique to Carver. So they didn't want it to feel like you were driving down any road in Carver County. They wanted the idea that it was branded and we had a unique identity. You would know that you were in Carver when you're driving the corridor. They also found value in incorporating some areas that we've already spent a lot of time working on collectively. So pieces like the sign coming off Highway 212 on Levi Griffin, near Levi Griffin. The signage, it was important to them, as well as some of the elements that we've already incorporated into the design of Levi Griffin and Monroe Drive. So if you think about the design of those 2 streets, we often pull the Minnesota River up into Carver. So you'll think about the river rock that mimics the way the Minnesota River travels through the medians that are in Levi Griffin and Monroe Drive at this point. Something else that was really important and that was helpful for them was to balance both function, safety, and aesthetics. So it couldn't be a project that looked great but wasn't safe for kids to get across to get to Carver Elementary, and it couldn't be something that was so crowded that it was dangerous to drive down. So a couple of things to keep in mind when we start to make some decisions about landscaping is that in many cases this is a one-time decision. It's not very often, Dan can speak to this more than I can, where a city goes back and adds additional landscaping or features to a project. Something to think about now is that we have a financing source right now. So if we start to think landscaping is great, but we only want to fund it 50%, and in 2023 we'll need to add the tax levy to be able to do that, it's one of those items that probably goes to the chopping block pretty early. So remember, right now we do have a financing source for this project, so to move forward with a project is important to get it looking the way we want it to right now. Another thing is that the decisions we make now really sets the tone. This is a long-term project. We're likely not going to go back to redo this for a very long time. So think long-term about this think about it more of as an investment as opposed to something that we can piece together over several years. Dan, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I'll just echo that. That was one of the things I thought that's a hard thing to get your head around, because the landscape numbers are in many cases fairly expensive. We'll try and walk through that in a little bit, but in my 20 years, I've never seen somebody really go back and do just a standalone modification to corridor landscaping. They'll add a little bit here and there, but you typically won't transform a corridor's look later. It's usually far more expensive, far more difficult. Things weren't planned out to get it done at the same time. So it's usually when something is completely ripped up and rebuilt that any of this happens. So that's why we were kind of identifying that this is generally the time to set the vision, because it's pretty hard to do it.
So moving through some of the ideas that the steering committee had, thinking through what it looks like long term, there definitely was a preference for more natural features. So they often spoke about spacing trees in a way that didn't seem like we were going every 6 feet or 10 feet or 12 feet. They wanted it to seem like trees existed before the road did. So taking out some of those features that you can see where a tree every X amount of feet. They were passionate about tying in the Minnesota River again, so mirroring what is on Levi Griffin and Monroe Drive throughout this project to create some continuity throughout town. They thought it was really important to have a sense of place again. Branding was something that they felt really passionately about, whether it be the name Carver, the water tower, the tugboat, the caboose. They wanted to bring those features into the project and pull some of those things from downtown up into what on top of the hill, so to create some continuity throughout town, not only from some of the new areas, but also pulling from some of the historic downtown. So here's an adorable photo of the group. I want to take a couple minutes just to thank them. Again, it was a project that we solicited pretty specifically to get different people with different perspectives. And it was really helpful to get such a wide variety of people. We often walked away with really good consensus. We often would start kind of big picture and then boil down. It was really fantastic. I think Councilmember Mock had the idea to have the master gardener in the group. Annette was not our master gardener in the group, but she also was a master gardener for a while, just to have some feedback that we didn't necessarily know about some of the features about tree species, plant species, what would last. Next. So going into some of the designs that they chose, so again, natural features. A lot of prairie grasses were discussed, so you'll see the first couple of pictures are just more natural areas, avoiding turf grass in the center when possible, just to keep a more natural look. Something else that was important, and something we'll need to work through with the county, is that the group really did like the look of the loose river rock that we have on Levi Griffin and Monroe Drive, but those are both city streets. So since this will be a county project, we might have some limitations if we can have the loose rock or not. So the photo in the center, we might need to move towards standard concrete that could mirror a similar look, but wouldn't look exactly the same. You'll also see the pullouts on the corridor are not just squared off. They wanted, again, to keep a natural look, to mirror the way a river would run. So avoiding areas that looked too sterile and too much like we're adding a road in an area that already existed. Next. Another big conversation we obviously had was the median. So we talked through adding the river rock or some type of stone concrete to again mirror the river. And then we talked through a lot of the plants. So at this point, we haven't identified species, but we have a general group of plants that we think would work. So we're not here tonight to dial into, I like this tree compared to this tree. That will come later. But something that the group definitely felt passionately about was having a robust tree canopy throughout the corridor to create a look, hopefully in a few years, that looks mature and dense. Next. Something else that they were really excited about was trail lighting. So thinking about the underpasses and the routes to Carver Elementary that are going to be used, it was important to the group to have trail lighting. So there are a couple of different options that we have. There are the decorative trail lighting poles that we have throughout town. So these have been installed along Levi Griffin, Monroe, Carver Station, or Carver Ridge, along with some trail lit bollards, so a little bit lower in scale, but provides some trail safety. So trail lighting was important to this group as opposed to corridor lighting. Dan can speak a little bit more into the type of lighting that would be required should we light the corridor, but they felt that trail safety with the lighting was more imperative than full lighting of the corridor. One of the design elements that they were really excited about were these columns. So again, thinking through branding, thinking about the water tower, the tugboat, the caboose, things that kind of scream Carver if you know much about our downtown. Something to note, the more columns that we would want to see throughout the corridor do drastically increase the price of the corridor, so we need to be strategic if we are interested in moving forward with these, is picking thoughtful locations where they would be seen most directly. We likely don't have the opportunity to have the entire corridor flooded with these, but could be important design elements at key points of the corridor. We talked through lighting of these as well. We thought it would be really cool if they were internally lit. You can see them as you drive down the corridor. Again, get that branding, sense of place, know that you're in Carver. And something else that I think a lot of us are pretty passionate about is the bridge over Highway 212 and the fact that we just have a railing right now. So as you travel down 212, most communities have some type of branding on their overpass, and I know it's something that we've thought about a lot. We would propose to have the Carver water tower as well as the name Carver added to the current railing. So as you're traveling west towards Cologne, there's the railing that we would retrofit with the water tower and the name Carver. Moving forward in the future, should there be a trail on the east side of the bridge, we could potentially add the railing with the additional graphic, but at this point we would just move forward with the one as you travel west towards Cologne. We talked a lot about the underpasses. So there's obviously one existing now with one planned in the future to get safely under the corridor. We talk a lot about how Jonathan Carver Parkway west of it is going to continue to develop. And a large number of our residents are going to live on that side of the corridor, but likely will want to travel by foot to things moving east. So to get downtown, to get through our trail system, it's going to be important that we can move them across the corridor safely. And one way that we can do that is through underpasses. So it was important to the group to retrofit the existing underpass to an upgraded fence. So right now it's the chain link that you see in the photo. They felt pretty strongly about going to a more decorative fence to add more of a design feature. They also felt really strongly about lighting, making sure that people felt safe in the underpasses at all times, adding some striping if bikes are flying through there quickly, just so people are respectful of each other. Coming in and out of the underpasses, again, incorporating those natural features, so having some wildflowers or natural grasses, and then a preference towards incorporating some of the limestone blocks instead of traditional benches. So it's both a design feature as well as an area that someone can sit and wait if they're waiting for their kids to come through the underpass from Carver Elementary. I would ask that you focus more keenly on underpass to the left, so the more traditionally round plain underpass instead of the right. The right would probably eat up our entire budget with the decorative stone. So it's a pretty picture, but likely not something that we'll be able to afford with this project. Next. That's back to you.
Yes. So what we decided to start with here is try and give you a little perspective about what type of numbers would typically be associated with a project like this. If I just kind of walk through the cost, it's a little bit hard to gather what's reasonable. This is well over a $10 million project here, which we're going to run through at the end of the effort here. Total project for all partners anyway. And so the numbers are fairly large. So what we did is we started looking at it as, all right, what's typical for a corridor of this size for landscape budgets and costs. So what we're going to start with is just a few examples of other corridors and the percentage of the project cost that was spent on landscape and visual elements. I mean, it gets a little complicating because in cases like County Road 11 here, you'd have a median that could be concrete, and you delete that concrete and then you put in grass. Well, there's the concrete costs X and the grass is cheaper, so there's a little bit of give and take. It's associated with decisions like that. Conversely, like lighting for the roundabout down to 6th Street, that's not really an optional item. It has to go in, but there'd be maybe a slight variation if the lighting was typically a lower cost pole that was upgraded up to a more decorative pole. And so there's a lot of give and take on this stuff. So we do the best we can to kind of average this all out and say what's kind of the net cost as a percentage of the quarter. So I'm going to walk through the different examples that are maybe similar in priority to like County Road 11 based on what we heard from the committee. So a couple of examples that we had some costs for Highway 61 up in White Bear Lake. How that broke out is the approximate landscape cost on that was about $460,000 per mile. The percentage of the project cost was 7% was spent towards visual elements. So this is less than a mile. So ultimately, the landscape numbers were about $500,000 in that. You'll see a number of structures in this corridor. It's a shorter stretch of road. There's a lot of very refined, mediums, planter beds, decorative concrete. So this is how we would say moderate, upper level landscape design. And so this will be one example of what was done in another community. Project familiar with Highway 5 in Laconia is another example. This is a little bit lower as a percentage of the project cost. It came out to be about a little over $500,000, about $550,000. A lot of that was lighting. A big priority of that corridor ended up being trail lighting and off-system lighting. The corridor itself was not lit, but the trail system was pretty well lit. Throughout it, there's some benches and decorative railings and walls and some spot planter beds out in the middle with so that one came out to be about 5%, give or take, of the construction costs was dedicated to some of the visual elements here. Mississippi Drive in Muscatine, Iowa. This was very highly landscaped. This is where the numbers get up a little bit higher. This is on the upper end of where you might say landscape was a very high priority in this corridor. You'll see about 10% of the construction budget was expended on landscape elements, visual elements, or wayfinding, as is seen on the top right. So they've got a lot of structural elements. That's what you'll note here. They've got some notable signage, pillars, lots of colored concrete, and planted out medians, boulders and such. So it's and then you'll also see quite a bit of lighting, street lighting. And so when you start adding up street lighting and such, the entire corridor, the numbers start to creep up. So anyway, this is going to be a higher end landscape example. So here's how these stack up here: Highway 5, 61 Mississippi Drive, the landscaping numbers that were put into those projects, and so all of these jobs are going to be millions of dollars. 10% of the 900,000. That job was perhaps about a $9 million project. So anyway, so all of these jobs are similar as far as the priority of the corridor. As far as we saw, Jonathan Carver Parkway in the city of Carver is really to be determined, and that's really what we're here to talk about. Is where would you like the project to be geared at this point? And so a mid-level landscape cost percentage for a corridor such as this, we're saying plus or minus about 5% might be about middle of the road for the priority of the corridor, as we've taken away our understandings from the steering committee. So with input gathering from stakeholders, 3 levels of concept plans were generated. That's what we're going to walk through here today. So what you're going to see is a low level, mid level, and high level. And the intention of the the landscape architects is to say, all right, here's what we heard. Here's the low level idea that would generate some of the feelings of the committee. You wouldn't get all of them because the committee was not tasked with trying to decide what should go in and out based on cost. They threw out ideas, and so the low level is going to reflect some ideas, but not all. The mid level is going to be kind of a step above that. It's going to be try and prioritize more of the ideas, more of the concepts, and but obviously a little bit of moderation to the cost. What can go in. High level is going to try and take every element and throw it out there and say if this is a very high priority corridor, many of the elements, as we heard, we're integrating into it. This is where it would shake out. And ultimately, we're looking for feedback on the direction. Typical budget, we'll say, is the 4 to 6%. Lower and higher alternatives are what you're going to see below, about 1 to 10%. I got to explain one thing before we get into that. Carver County they deal with landscaping elements on many of their projects. And so they have come up with a means to deal with the ups and downs associated with landscaping that can occur in a median. That is a big item that we can do account here because what the median baseline would be is concrete. And so the counties agreed that, all right, if nothing was done there and we just put in concrete, we'd pay for it. And so that can be used as a direct credit to the city if they say, no, we don't want concrete, we'd like it grass with trees. So what the county is willing to do is say in the joint powers agreement, which is the payment terms of the contract and the agreement between the two agencies, it's say, all right, whatever the cost of concrete for all these meetings would be, we will put that into the powers agreement that we will contribute that dollar amount towards the city. And so this is an estimation. The actual amount is square footage times the real bid cost. That would vary based on bid, but we're estimating about $400,000. The numbers that you're about to see take into account a $400,000 credit towards the city of Carver that can be applied to the landscape element. So I'm going to start with that. So keep in mind every number you're going to see is going to incorporate that 400,000. The low-level concept is about 1 to 2%. You'll see basically grasses. To try and get the natural look of the corridor. It's not all hardscape. You'll see very little else. There's not much for lighting on the corridor. Nothing for trees. It just doesn't work. But what the landscape architect did take away is that the landscape at the roundabout was a huge priority. That they thought that was a focal element of the project, and so he put the money towards just that feature, the roundabout landscaping. Now you'll notice that there's not tremendous difference in the landscaping at the roundabout itself because that's where most of the money is expended here. And I'm going to kind of walk through what the differences are in a bit so you can see a little bit more about how these compare. To get into the mid-level concept, it stays somewhat native with grasses in the middle, also trees in there, trees on the outside. So you'll see a big difference here. Trees and some lighting is incorporated into the corridor. At the roundabout, you'll see some of the same flavors for design, but there's some different structural elements added to the corridor. If you'll recall the structural columns that were tied to that Carver field with some more decorative concrete. But some of the center plantings in the roundabout are fairly similar. High-level concept, you start getting into a lot of the more manicured medians. We'll talk maintenance in a hurry. I'm sure everybody's thinking of that, but that'll be noted as well in this discussion. But a lot of it goes into median plantings. You'll see an extra structural element is added for the decorative column feature at the northern end of the project. At the southern end, there's more structural elements, more structural features that you'll see more. There's going to be more of the limestone blocks. There'll be more, manicured planter beds and of colored concrete and such. So it's a little bit hard to follow without doing just a kind of run through comparison. So I'm going to do that right now. So these are the exact same images, but here's the northern end of the project looking south. This is what is going to be built geometrically, and this would be the low-level concept. So this would be stepping into the mid-level concept, is adding trees to the corridor. That's what that does to the character of the corridor. And then the high level gets into the more manicured elements here. So that gets into the column features, the structural columns, and a lot more plantings and planter beds and such. So do the same thing for the roundabout. That's what you have today. And all the before conditions. I always have gray skies, so now it's nice today. But the base level is still a fair amount of landscape elements here. What you get into when you get into the mid-level concept is you get into the structural features that we're not able to fit in budget into the base level. So huge difference if you look at the trees being added to the corridor and some of the structural columns. Note these are the only areas that they show up in the mid-level. So it's just a couple of them versus when you get into the higher level, you've got more of them. There's going to be more of everything. Ultimately, is what it comes down to. But certainly more structural columns, more colored concrete, more plantings, more planter beds, and such. So one more time, I'll walk through them just for your benefit here. Existing base level, or low level, mid level, high level. Existing base level, mid level, high level. Okay, so I'm going to buzz through these very quickly. This is more intended for someone to take a look at after the fact if they'd like to look at what went into the various ideas. But here's just a real quick glimpse of looking at the entire corridor is what goes into the lower level concept. So for trees, you don't see anything. For landscape and planted beds, you see them just at the roundabout. For landscaping, native seating, the medians are seated. Just native seating. Decorative river rocks is focal point. A few areas that might be decorative concrete based on budget allowances, and then you'll see it at the roundabout, similar to what you've seen in the other options. Pedestrian underpass, there's very little in there for treatments of the underpasses, so there's very, very minimal change to what you have out there today. So mid-level concept, you can see everything here shown in magenta is trees. So you'll see quite a bit of tree planting in the corridor, landscape beds again at the roundabout. In the medians, there's some native seating similar to the other concepts. A bit more decorative concrete is allowed in this version. And then there's some monument signage, structural columns. You'll notice that's included in the Highway 212, and then down at the roundabout, you'll see some of those decorative columns that you saw earlier on. And in the low level, you will not see anything for those features here for the monument signing. So high level concept, trees, lots of planter beds, a lot more planter beds, more native seating, more decorative concrete, river rock. There's certainly more opportunities to do that. Higher budgets, you'll see a lot more column features. Those structural columns are, they do add some expense. It's more littered throughout the corridor. Trail lighting, there's more opportunities for lighting, but similar to the mid-level concept. And then the underpass has more elaborate as well. So maintenance considerations, a couple of comments from Brian and his team. We looked at as medians is a big concern. Parking spots for maintenance vehicles in the ends of medians is a big deal. Longer medians add parking in the middle so that they can park and maintain it for both ends and in the middle. Recommend a concrete maintenance strip to try and keep the maintenance equipment away from the traffic. Again, there's no shoulders on this corridor, so that is strongly recommended to have at least a 12-inch separation from the higher speed traffic to the mowers and whoever's out there doing maintenance work. And then general maintenance comments, consider safety for median access maintenance needs, which of course is utmost concern for the final design elements. Plant items that need little or no maintenance. Use plant items that are salt tolerant. That's always a challenge. There's certainly plants that do better than others, but short of plastic plants, we're always struggling with if it's really heavily salted. We do struggle, so a lot of it gets into placement and such. And then there are certainly more species that are more tolerant than others. So to this point, little or no maintenance and salt tolerant as possible for plantings. And then keep irrigation controllers and valves out of medians and to a minimum. And at this point, irrigation is not planned for in the corridor. But if it were for any of the refined beds, the goal would be to make sure that it can be controlled without getting into the center. So here's a quick summary of it all. Low level, mid level, high level. I'd say the concrete is a baseline for the lowest median maintenance. Median landscape, low and mid levels are moderate weed management and grasses. Basically monitoring the weeds and controlling weeds growth. Median high level is much more manual maintenance intensive. As planted areas with trees, it's going to be a lot more weeding and such. Across the board, the higher level alternative is largely going to be higher maintenance. Lower level, the roundabout landscape, you can see that's got a lot of plantings. You don't see a dramatic difference in that. There's going to be a fair amount of maintenance just associated with making sure it looks nice with weed control. Boulevards, the lowest level is low grass, no trees to mow around or anything. Mid level is moderate, no grass, no trees. Higher level is going to be a few more planter beds, moderately higher. So that would sum up the options. And I would be diving into the cost summaries at this point here. So the next part of this would be current costs on the project, and we'll kind of walk through how this fits into overall project budget. So if there's any questions you want me to stop, feel free to ask about the concepts if you like, and we'll get into the costs. Any questions, or you want me to keep going?
Sorry, I have a question.
Go ahead, Lori.
Aaron had some earlier slide talked about and showed river rock versus concrete, and it sounds like the concrete would be more preferred. Is that because of maintenance or cost?
Well, the river rock is a maintenance and to a degree a safety concern for the county. Loose rock onto the highway get kicked up and such. So if there was going to be a river rock seal in the median, it probably wouldn't be like a local street. It would probably be something that would have to be brought into place so that it was solid. And so it's maintenance. It's okay. So you don't have loose rock.
Okay, that's a maintenance thing. And then with the joint powers of agreement, does that spell out who's responsible for maintenance? Who is?
Yes. I can tell you the answer will be the city.
Okay.
It's going to be the city.
Right. But then the county would plow it.
County would plow it, but if there's landscape elements, the agreement would be that if you're going to put this in the corridor, the county would say, yes, okay, we'll permit it, but you're going to have to.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Anything else?
Oh, go ahead, Christy.
Thank you. In looking at the plans for the roundabout, I saw there was pedestrian marked crossings on maybe 2 of the streets, but was it meant to be that it'll be marked for pedestrian crossing at all 4? Yep. Okay, if you go back where the trees are in it, you can see where it looks like it's marked by the dental office and then by community park. Is it meant to have pedestrian crossings marked on all corners?
Well, you got a good final design comment on that one, because that is a big topic here. It's I would say going to be on 3 sides for sure. it's also, it's gonna be a topic of discussion as to whether or not it should go on the north side as well. But, because sometimes they'll wanna accommodate the crossing, on the north side just to make it certain, just so you can go around all sides. But at this point, it's for sure, east and west side and south side.
And then I have a question for you. So the colors for inside the underpass, you showed us obviously that really gorgeous one that we can't afford. But if you look at the one that is proposed, it's a really,
Let's see. Get it. I gotta go back a ways. All right. There you go.
oh, yep. So it's a really dark, dingy brown. Is there a reason that we haven't painted or concrete colored, whatever it might be, that it's so dark where having something even a little bit lighter might have a little more light reflection in there for sight lines?
That's a good comment, and I guess it's a paint job, and there's nothing that says we couldn't apply budget towards repainting. So if that's a priority, if you something you'd like to see, that's a comment we'd write down.
For the new one, even.
For the new one certainly. That's just a matter of specking it out as to what would be done with it. The old one would be a repaint if we were to change the color and it decided that it was worth it to stay consistent.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dan, the questions that I had is when you showed like every single, low, middle, high concept for the roundabouts there, it doesn't look like any of the upgraded or new lighting is demonstrated in those concepts. Is that true? And we're just looking at more of the landscaping without that lighting element?
Yeah, you got another good one for final design. You're on the ball tonight here because that's another design element.
Just
that
tonight.
Yeah. Well, you're picking at the details here that I was thinking.
Okay.
Can I ask you about that one? But the reason why we didn't put that in there is because it's necessary, but we have to pick a pole still, and so the roundabout lighting has to be laid out and designed for certain lighting levels. And so I didn't know where the poles were going to end up at this point, but there will have to be lighting there, just to light it for safety, and then we'll have to pick up a pole and see this is what would be most appropriate. So for the corridor. So yes, it needs to happen. It's just they're not placed yet.
Okay, and there's likely going to be probably at least 4 times the number of light poles there versus the one that exists, correct?
Yes, it's going to light probably 300 feet up and down in each direction on the corridor. You're going to probably be looking at 300 feet north and south of overhead lighting. Both head crossings will be heavily lit, and it's really just a matter of pole placement and then the pole selection at this point. But now, when you get into lighting on something like this, you would be able to say, hey, what we think if you really need to have upcast lighting in the center of the roundabout. Those are one of the things that we could say, that'd be a design element that could be worked into it, but it will be lit overhead. Roundabouts do that.
Okay. The other thing is you talked a lot about native seating, and I guess as far as like the medians go, I didn't, and you talked about mowing and maintenance, and I certainly get the need for weeding some of that, but I didn't see, we don't have any concepts with grass in the median that needs to be mowed, correct?
No, generally speaking here, that we usually get as a preference to get something that's unmowed.
Okay.
And that just as weed control. That's certainly a comment we could get, is if there's a preference to mow it, certainly.
No.
But it's hard to mow.
No, I share that preference. I just wanted to clarify that so that when you're talking about mowing, you're talking about the boulevard, the edges of the road, and not the median, not the center boulevard.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. It would be the center left alone, the best we can, weed control outside.
Got it. Perfect. That's all I have. Anybody else with comments, questions at this point?
Dan, could you go back to the roundabout question one more time? Forgot one of my questions. Right. The one that has the lit columns. There we go. So, I'm assuming that those are going to be spendy, for those columns. So if we were to go with some type of column column identifiers, than having multiple ones hidden kind of off to the side in the trees, will we cut down the cost? Is there a reason that by the two rocks there in the median, we couldn't put one there and cut out at least one of them? There might be more around the edges, I can't tell for sure. Is there a reason that they're off to the side rather than in the median?
There's some requirements that say if the median's too narrow, you can't put it in there because it becomes a safety hazard if it's an obstacle. So in this area, the median gets narrow enough that we might not be able to put it in there.
Well, it actually gets pretty wide as you head towards the roundabout.
It does, and I'm not saying it's not possible. It might be. It would just end up being a design discussion with the county staff as to whether or not they're comfortable with it. Yeah, I know you can do it in the middle of a roundabout because, you know, the center third is generally considered safe. So what your comment is you would like to see something like that right in the splitter island. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I guess I would rather hear from the rest of the council their feelings. I don't know what the cost per column is at this point, but I can imagine it's spendy. So I don't know how everyone else looks at that as to the importance of it or not. But I was just considering if we were going to do one or some, if we could bring the number of them down, you know, cost-wise, is it worth us looking at that?
Sure. Oh, I'll defer.
I agree with you, Christy. I think I want to learn more about the price of those, but for me, it seems a little hidden, almost, and off to the side. That said, are more people going to enjoy it on foot that way? That might be a conversation to really dig into for a different day, but it doesn't seem like it will catch your eye as much driving past there in that location.
Right, Courtney, and I kind of feel the same, that if we want to be branded and we want our branding seen and noticed, then let's, if possible, put it somewhere where it gets the highest visibility.
Agreed.
And to me, tucked off in that location would not be a preference for me.
Agreed.
All right.
Go ahead, Glenn.
When I had my questions early on regarding the center of the circles or whatever you want to call them this week, like putting a boulevard or walking the Carver or something in there, I was told no because of the site. Now whether that's on those approach islands or not, I think that would be more of a, it'd be more visible, but the reality of it is it would mess with the sight lines in the middle of the roundabout. Just my opinion. Lights, we gotta keep the trails lit. We wanna keep the trail. I'd like to see the trail lit all the way down 6th Street through someday. And maybe we could figure out a way that we can do that within this project. As far as the tunnels, we should be able to do those, because once you start talking about staining or coloring the concrete, now it's a whole different level of money as well. I'm not sure. I mean, we're gonna get into budgets and money next, so I guess I'll just kind of defer until we hear more about the cost of those monument signs and stuff. I understand the branding, but they can be very expensive as well.
Any other comments? All right, let's keep going, Dan.
Okay. All right, I made some notes. Just so you know, the comments will get written down. There'll be reviews with the county on what's feasible, and I'll try and blend a design with your comments to what the county's comments for for safety and other concerns they might have, and ultimately guided towards a finished product that you'd have an opportunity to, I guess, confirm prior to final design. But that being said, what we need is what's the general direction. We're the quarter a little bit high, so we're going to talk a little bit about costs at this point. So the following costs are after the city's anticipated share of the county median credit. The median's not going to be concrete, so they would give money to the city for whatever they are going to do. So the high level is 1.2 million. That gets up there. That includes a fair amount of contingency and such, but again, we're trying to be straight up with planning level numbers on this. Mid-level landscaping, it would shake out to be about $600,000, and the low level is about $100,000 after the county's credit. So a little bit about the other elements that you're budgeting for in the corridor. This is Monroe Drive. About $300,000 would be dedicated at this point to adding another left turn lane as primarily the work that would be a city obligation if that were done. So that'd be adding a second left turn lane. That's ultimately a long-term need. It's certainly ultimately needed. Short term, it would be fine for a while, but thought is that this would be the time to plan for it and build it with the road being under construction. So that's why it's included at this point. The city also has the cost of the other side of the road, anything that's done on the local street outside the county right away. So you get to Ironwood, second westbound lane going into the school is being added, and the second left turn lane exiting the school is being added. That's approximately $500,000 netting costs. And then Dahlgreen, I've circled the entire intersection at this point to show you what's changing. So a roundabout intersection with the tie down on Dahlgreen Road and a tie in on 6th Street. That is approximated at about just under 7 for the city's share of this roadway segment. So other things that are in the project: City of Carver utilities, sanitary sewer, 2 casing pipes across 11. This is an opportunity-based element. Eventually, we're programming that you would need sanitary sewer lift station on the west side of County Road 11, going to the east. If you'll recall from past discussions, we did eliminate the need to going off the size of that 21-inch going all the way down the corridor. That did remove a lot of costs, but going to a lift station in the future is the current thinking. That would require us crossing 11. So ultimately what would be done is you put in 2 casing pipes across 11 because the road is ripped up at this point. A lot cheaper to do it now than it would be to jack a casing pipe across active highway in the future. And then ultimately putting in the force mains that would be in the County Road 11 right away would be another element. And again, these are opportunity-based elements that would be likely quite a bit more expensive to do later. Water main, same thing, pressure reducing station, which is a separate CIP project that's necessary to replace a failed pressure reducing station. That line of pipe, I believe, is inactive at this point. That's being coordinated with the County Road 11 project, so that's a separate CIP item that would be coordinated with this plan because it's in the corridor. 14-inch raw water main crossing 11. You're all familiar with the water treatment facility and raw wells, of course. So that would simply be putting the casings in and part of the pipe with the project. That's basically an opportunity to get it done without drilling it. And then some water main relocations that might be necessary with the roundabout. It might be required to relocate some of the water main that would be in a poor location for the final intersection, some hydrant relocations. So those are the utilities that are being at least budgeted for right now. So here's a summary of the overall project cost. I mentioned that this is still planning level, so I'm going to emphasizes 30% estimate as far as I would be concerned. So $17.5 million is the project cost approximation at this point. That includes $2.5 million of construction contingency at this point, programmed about $2 million project soft cost. Right away, again estimated at about $500,000, a very early estimate, and then construction about $12.5 million. The way that would break down by participant between Carver County and the city of Carver is Carver County would, of that, be about $11.5 million. The city of Carver would be in the neighborhood of $6 million. The way that breaks down is if you get into the city of Carver's share of $6 million, that would break into a number of different categories here. So you'll see about $3 million of that is general bonding authority, streets and related improvements. That's where the landscape bucket is sitting at this point. The park dedication fund had programmed, I believe, about $500,000 for the pet underpass and trail improvements. So that's broken out here separately, about $500,000 committed to the project. Sanitary sewer fund would be about $500,000 for current estimates. Water fund would fund about $400,000 of that $6 million. And then the county median credit is included in there of estimated about $400,000. That'd be about 7% towards the share. The All Green Road improvement payments has already been secured from a prior developers agreement, coming in at about $267,000. That would be a contribution towards All Green Road. And storm sewer improvements would be in the neighborhood of $1 million. That gets broken down by formula, by the cities contributing water to the storm sewer system, and the whole storm sewer system gets split up by formula, and according to the cost participation policy of the county.
Dan, can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Of that $6 million, is that the all-in number? Does that include the landscaping and all of the improvements of your 3 previous slides?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have noted that. What I included under this scenario was the mid-level. Okay. I had to pick one, so I just picked the mid-level at this point to carry it forward. So this would all increase or decrease based on the lower high.
Thank you.
Yeah, storm sewer fund was $1 million, and note that we had some money would be reprogrammed from the 2018 job that would be allocated towards the JCP project, because part of that storm sewer that was programmed in the 2018 job would be done with the county road project, cooperation with the county, and so some of that money could potentially be could be programmed towards this job. So that's really not broken out into this. It's just $1 million total that is observed.
Excuse me, Dan, could I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead.
So a little preview, we've had one meeting with Paul Steinman, Dan Lanis, Larry Harris, and Mary Ipple, who's the city's bond counsel, has also contributed. But the vehicle that we're looking at financing this project is what's called a street reconstruction fund. And so it'll work similar to what you recall the city used for the city hall, in that we'll create a plan, a street reconstruction plan, that'll have the Jonathan Carver Parkway project in it. The council will adopt that plan, and then it has a reverse referendum option, where if 5% of the registered voters sign a petition within 30 days of the council adopting a resolution approving the plan, then the item would go to referendum. So what we're working towards is a schedule that would look at the city council considering to adopt that plan later this summer. Once we get through kind of the state of the world that we're in now, and we'll have to kind of manage it as we move forward. But that's kind of the elements. One of the pieces that we've asked Paul Stein to look at with Springstead is, so if you see the kind of the area shaded in kind of the ocean blue at 3.9 million, or if I round up to 3, That's the amount that the city would be considering bonding for under the street reconstruction area. And so that's a number that, as we kind of get the feedback from the council tonight, will kind of shape. And then I want to come back to the council with Paul Steinman's help and give you an idea of what the tax impact is for that. One of the things to consider is the city is going to have a bond issue that's going to come off the tax rolls in 2021. The best way to think about it is the fire station bonds, the fire station and a public services building and some other related street improvements, or not related, but street improvements that occurred at that time will be paid off. And so that will also contribute to kind of the sensitivity analysis that the Spring Center, now Baker Tilly will be performing. So that's kind of a rounded view of kind of the financing plan of how we pay for the general bonding related to the tax levy, depending upon the health of the sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and water fund. There might have to be additional bond funds, and those will be related to utility. We have over $1 million in our park education funds, and we'll have the cash able to do that. We have cash on hand from the prepaid developers payments from Dalvin Road. That was from Lamar and the Carver Square development properties. I see Larry Harris is still on the line. Larry, if you're listening, is there anything that I missed or anything you want to add for context for the city council related to street reconstruction funds?
No, I don't think so, Brian. I think you accurately summarized it. But from the council's perspective, although they're completely different statutes, the process and the reverse referendum is really, as you said, it's exactly the same to run a city hall. So, when we get a little further into it, and we'll be coming forward to the council with a street reconstruction plan, and we'll start the process. There'll be approval, and we've got a time period we have to wait and see if we get signatures on a petition.
Okay, thank you. Dan, can you move forward, please?
Okay. All right. So to close up this this presentation here, we ultimately just looking for a few pieces of feedback here. I know this was a lot of information, a lot to take in. It really wouldn't be the last opportunity to say something about some of these elements here, because again, this is the beginning of the final design process. But ultimately, what we're looking for is council feedback on the corridor landscape direction. So, what would be necessary to even move towards a more refined design, which would incorporate all the different elements that you've talked about tonight, made comments about. What about the roundabout lighting? What about the placement of these columns, things to that nature? That would all be guided by this decision, low, middle, high, for the landscape direction. We'd have plant selections and all kinds of stuff. So that's ultimately one element that we'd be looking for feedback on, low, mid, high. And then verify local street improvement scope designs, make sure that there's nothing in those current designs that you'd want us a veto at this point. Say, no, don't carry that any further. It's not worth the money to add those lanes at this time. We'll do it later. That type of feedback would be appreciated. And again, it's not too late, but it will be soon. At a certain point, there's going to be a lot of redo, make changes later. And it's at this point that we would say it's getting into the redo stage if we start deleting a lot. And so just verify that those designs are what we want to move forward with, and then provide feedback on project costs, anything that would inform some next steps. So upcoming, there's going to be a construction stage and review for the detour. Certainly some major elements will come out of that here as we get the modeling and downtown operations better understood with the study that we've asked them to complete. We'll have more to talk about on that. Final design details and plans, that will be the details for everything we've talked about on the landscape plan, down to each specific plant. Sanitary and sewer, water system related, the project has to be completed and incorporated in the project. And then, of course, there's going to be a joint powers agreement phase. city and county terms get set. And all the different things that get decided on have to be memorialized by agreement. And so that's the joint powers agreement. That would be forthcoming. And then right-of-way acquisitions is going to be a big element that's happening. So I will turn it over to questions and a discussion on any of these steps.
All right. Go ahead, Lori.
I definitely would support medium or high as far as when we're looking at the landscape direction on the corridor. I even think of this too as like this section of John Carver Parkway is the gateway to Carver. So yeah, that's my feedback. I don't have any questions. Thank you. They already got answered, but I would lean towards medium or high.
Thank you, Lori. So I think my feedback is I feel pretty strongly about mid for the level of landscape design. I think that looks nice. I think it's pleasing to the eye. Lori, I agree with you that this is a really visual corridor to our community, but I think we can accomplish a lot with $600,000, and I'm not comfortable spending too much more than that. I am not sure that we need to have, as somebody who frequents that trail along JCP at night a lot, I'm not sure that we necessarily need to have it lit up like a Christmas tree. I think I appreciate, and I probably should have said this first and foremost, I appreciate all of the work that the Landscape Design Committee did. Really, really thrilled with how all of this looks. I also appreciate having the flexibility to go low, medium, and high and have those options, but really appreciate all of the work that everybody did on that. And then I think as far as everything else, Stan, that you're looking for feedback on, the street improvement stuff looks good. I mean, you guys are the experts. If this is what we need to make traffic more efficient coming in and out of the city of Carver, then let's go ahead and do it. And I agree with you on the project upgrades. Now is the time to do when that street will be ripped up. So I think that is it for me for now. Who else has comments, questions? Go ahead, Joy.
Sorry, it took me a moment to get off mute. Okay, so I am definitely mid is as low as I want to go with this. I really appreciate all of the thought and intention and the details that the committee went through. I really liked the vision that they had for this corridor. I really feel like we need to have the trees, not just in the medians, but along on the boulevards as well. It's so impactful. I liked the statement about lighting the trail versus lighting the corridor. We're going to have so much lighting at the intersections, right? We're going to have 2 lighted intersections plus the roundabout. That's a lot of lighting, right, on that stretch of road. So focusing the rest of the lighting just on the trail area, that really resonated with me. I do like the idea of having some monuments, just to give it that sense of Carver, that uniqueness. So that's why I'm kind of sitting at the mid minimum. And I also support all of the other local street improvements. I mean, we just talked about the EAW for timber, whatever it was, and obviously needing those additional turn lanes. So let's do it. I think those are a must. That's my feedback.
Thank you. Go ahead, Christy.
I agree with Joy and supporting the road construction. All of that looks great. I do think that the mid is a great spot for us to be in. The dollar amount is something I can go along with. I think the high is a little bit excessive at this point, but I do think that the middle ground gives us a really beautiful looking stretch of road. For the lights, Joy, I 100% agree with you. We don't need to light that up like a Christmas tree at every point. We will have lights at the intersection. Actually, just lights at the underpasses would be all we would need. When we're talking about the monuments, I I know there's a few there. I really like the branding. I think I want to look at better placement would be my suggestion, which may cut down on our need for as many if we have better sight lines to it. So I am for the mid-range of those other products.
Thank you. Glenn, I think your last one.
I was falling into the middle range as well. Monuments are expensive, and then when you start putting lights in them, it just gets more expensive. So, watch the costs on the monuments. Yeah, lighting of the trails is important. But I still believe that the roundabout should be lit up as well, for the simple fact that it's a roundabout. And I've seen some dangerous stuff happen in them.
Glenn, I think it will be. I don't think that that's even an option. Correct, Dan?
Yes, yeah, it has to be. I apologize, I didn't show it. It just needs to be shown correctly. So I didn't.
All right. And I'm for putting in the turn lanes on Monroe and Ironwood now, because tearing up and redoing it in 2 years is insane. And I think that's a cost that we need to look at as incorporating into the cost of construction. I just do. Those are my high points. I don't want to get into the weeds, no pun intended. That's all I got.
All right. Dan, did you get what you need from us on that?
Yep, absolutely. That's the guidance we need, and there's more to come on taking some of your comments and trying to build it into the plan. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Moving on, 10.2, 2018 Stormwater Project Update. Mr. Lennis.
Okay. Switch over. All right. Okay, I will keep this as brief as possible here. This is a quick update on the 2018 storm sewer project, just to tell you where things are at and what to expect in the future. Not surprisingly, you probably know where it's at. The river's up and nothing's happening. But we will tell you what might happen in the future if the river goes down. So just as a brief history and status, project summary and next steps here, we'll cover why are we doing it. There's been a lot of talk about this, so just chime in if there's any questions if I go too quick. But it's basically combining 2 stormwater lift stations into one, improve reliability, operations, the reduced maintenance requirements and such. It was in 2018 that this was going out here. It couldn't be done in 2019 because of river levels. And that's really where we stand today, is the river's been up and we just haven't had an opportunity. So the only time that the river was low enough was during, unfortunately, steamboat days. So we're back this spring and waiting for the river to go down. What you had in the past is those yellow elements, or these 3 stormwater lift stations. And then there's 1 temporary pumping station at Depot Park Outlet. That red dot is a temporary station that Brian pumps out of when the river's up, and it needs to be it needs to be manually pumped at this point. And so the ultimate plan is to combine those 2 easterly stations into one in Riverside Park. So the project area is existing lift station at Broadway would be removed, and then the existing Main Street lift station would be added as well. So what do the stormwater lift stations do? When the river gets high enough, the sluice gates get shut, and then the stormwater goes into those stormwater lift stations, and it gets pumped up over the levee in the river above the flood level. So they're pretty essential, very critical, and so the need to make sure you have some confidence in the operations, and that they're robust systems. is quite high because obviously the flooding occurs if they're not working. So it's a dual pump station that's being constructed. So here's the fundamentals of what's being built. Proposed project is to replace the Main Street lift station with the larger station, eliminate the Broadway station, and add some pipe to get the water that goes from the Broadway station to the new one. And then that blue section is to add a connection that would get rid of that manual pumping that happens up at Depot. So that's the work that needs to happen, and it just needs to happen when the river's low enough. So at this point, it's just continuing to monitor the river levels. I believe it has to get down below 20 in order to get some of the work completed, and then down even further to get all of it completed. So what you see there in blue is where it's at, and we're hoping that it trends as it's shown here over the next week or two. So at this point, we're not anticipating work to start in the next week or two, but if there's a sudden major drop, they're going to be ready to pounce on it. But for the time being, it's probably going to be a couple of weeks before the work actually can start, all pending the flood elevation. So when it does happen here, I think we've talked about what to expect. There'd be some pipe work in the downtown area and some pipe work in that 4th Street to 3rd Street connection area. All that would be open cut storm sewers. So if there's any questions on that, we will probably have more information and more communications on that as we're about ready to construct. But as of now, it's still on hold pending the river dropping. So any other questions? And Aaron Schmidt's on the line here. We've just been tracking this, and Brian Skoke, I believe, as well. So they have been on top of this the whole time.
Any questions? Go ahead, Lori.
I have a question. Is there, other than the level of the river, can this be done in the winter, or is this a seasonal project?
It can be done in the winter. In fact, we were just talking about that this fall, or this spring, or late winter, as to whether or not we'd cut it loose to happen in the winter time. The challenge with doing it in the winter is you don't have access to bituminous repave patches. So that was one of the compromises. You do it in the winter time, you're not paving any of your patches back in until spring. But it was getting to the point where if the river's never low enough, it's almost too risky for people to do it on. But by the time they were able to go, the river had come up and the opportunity was lost. So if we can't find a window this summer, I think we'll have that discussion again.
All right. And about how big a window for time frame do you need? Like, does this take a week? Does this take 3 months? Sorry, I have no idea.
This is probably, the station itself may take a little bit longer to finish up all the controls and everything, but the pipe work itself is probably weeks, 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Christy's nodding no. Glenn's nodding no. Joy's nodding no. Okay. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the update on that. All right. Moving on to council member updates. Joy, do you have any?
No, I have no updates.
Right. Glenn?
No, I don't have any updates other than seems like everything that we went over tonight pretty much relies on the river and the river levels. But we'll get it done this winter or this spring. Well, anyway, I have confidence. Other than that, stay safe, everybody.
All right. Lori?
No updates.
Christy?
I have just a couple of things. Brent, we've talked a lot about city staff when it comes to our office staff at City Hall. So the fire department obviously has to have contacts with the public. How are they doing on PPE? Are they following on protecting themselves, or are they in a good spot right now? Do you know?
I don't, but I see Allie, or Chief Trimble, is on the line.
Chief, are you able to respond to that?
Yes, I am. At this time, there's no immediate need for PPE. We have plenty to make it through April and most of May. And we're reaching out and filling out all the surveys and things like this. So we're not concerned about it at this point in time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Callie.
You're welcome.
And then for HPC, obviously we haven't had any meetings, but I know a couple that just bought a house in the district, and I, from well distanced away, was talking to them about their house, and I did mention, obviously when you ask them, what are you doing? What do you do with the yard? What are you fixing? And I mentioned to them about the exterior alterations needing to go to the city or the HPC, and they were very surprised. They had no idea, living in a historic house, they would need to do that. I know that this probably isn't the appropriate time to take, a flyer around to people and say, hey, go ahead and check in on this online or whatever it might be. I don't know if we want to mail anything out at this point or not, to even give them an idea of where they could find it online to look for it. But if people are at home and digging into some construction projects, what do you think we might be able to do to maybe get the word out again for people who live in a historic home?
Sure. And that's something that we've done periodically to send out a kind of a flyer, like almost a welcome. You're in the historic district, or a reminder you're in the historic district. So I believe we have something on file that's already been created. So it'll just be a matter of putting together that mailing list. So I think that'd be a really, frankly, a good project for us to take on. Aaron, I don't know if can't remember if you were here or not when we sent that first one out, but yeah, so I think that'd be something that we could again send out. I think we're looking at the possibility of doing something annually, understanding that people are going to move in and out of the district.
That sounds great. And I think, Aaron, tell me if I'm wrong, we sent out the full packet last spring, right?
We did, yes.
Okay, the design guidelines. So maybe not necessary right now, but sending them a letter to remind them that you are in the historic district, and here, look on, go to our city website for more information. Does that make sense, or did you have more?
No, that sounds great. We can do some social media postings on top of that as well.
That'd be awesome. The last thing I had to apologize for my lateness to the meeting. Every electronic device that I had in my home decided to gang up on me all at the same time. When I finally got something to work, I got on. So again, I apologize. That's all I have.
No need to apologize. Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, when Christine mentioned that, about a new resident, being in the historic district, is there any, ownership for the realtor, or doesn't that need to be disclosed? I guess I'm just a little disappointed that, that what happened, that someone would move in there and not know.
Aaron, do you want to jump on that?
It depends on the realtor, really, and how much they dig into the property.
Okay.
You don't regulate a realtor, give them information unless they call. So,
okay.
Hope that they give them the information, but that's not always the case, unfortunately.
Well, Lori, sometimes I'll jump in here too, but what I've asked when things have gone on the MLS or whatever down here for sales of homes, the realtor not always, but many times will note that it's on the National Historic Registry, but that's as far as it goes. They don't provide anything past that. So it may note it, but that doesn't tell the person they need to look farther into what they can do. It's just noted as almost a selling point of oh, look at, you're on the district, but there's no follow-up or meat behind it.
Okay.
All right. I got everybody, right? Council members? Okay. I just have a few quick things. As we're going through this new normal, we have spent the last 3 hours, and I don't think anybody said COVID once. So it's really a testament to how, and what I want to keep doing is, as much as we can, business as usual in the city of Carver. With respect and a lot of awareness of the situation that we are now living in. I want to try to make sure that whenever possible, we're kind of continuing to move forward on these projects. So it was great to hear the update on the JCP project and the 2018, what am I trying to say, stormwater project as well. Again, another huge kudos to not only the department heads, but pretty much every single staff member in the city of Carver who's done a really good job dealing with this new normal. We have folks working, I think almost everybody's working from their kitchen tables these days, and everybody has done a really good job. A lot of dark things going on in our world these days, so I wanted to just take a really quick second to point out just a handful of really bright spots. We have folks and members of our community who are sewing masks for their neighbors. Brittany Ellison and council member Mock worked together to set up a little free pantry in Gazebo Park here right across the street from City Hall. J. Carver Distillery in Waconia made a really generous donation to Carver Fire to make sure that all of our folks have enough hand sanitizer so that when they're not next to a sink with running water, they can make sure that they're sanitizing their hands and are as safe as can be these days. Our community has rallied around some of the newest members of our community, the folks in Carver Ridge, whom nobody has lived there longer than February. So they're brand new to our community, and they're now being hit the hardest with all the social distancing guidelines. They're not allowed to have any visitors. But so many members of our community have had their kids write letters or draw pictures and kind of communicating with those folks as best as they can from far away. I also want to give just a super quick update. In Brent's update, he talked a little bit about potentially prorating a refund or a credit on the liquor license. I know that we have some hurdles with our ordinances to go through to get a rebate for that, but I've been trying to reach out to the standalone businesses who own liquor licenses in our city. And I've only been able to connect with Laura Nishi, but she was thrilled to hear that. And I know it's not a ton of money compared to what some of these business owners are going through. But I also want to push council hard to hear if you guys hear of any other communities doing anything. What are your ideas for how we can help our business community and keep our downtown strong, our business community strong, do whatever we can to support those business owners and other residents in our community. I think that is it for the update from me. Mr. Merrick, what do you got?
Mayor Johnson?
Yeah.
I spoke with Lisa from Lisa's Place about it, that we were looking at it, and obviously any help they can get from us at this point. She's completely closed down at this point, so there's no income of any kind coming in. So I think really in the broad scheme of our businesses down here, anything we can do to help them out. I did forward them some of the grant programs that are coming out of the state to see if that might be something that fits for them also. So I don't know, they're hurting, and I hope it's anything possible to help them out.
Yeah, and Christy, as part of the Business Alliance, Brent and Aaron, I think Aaron's been forwarding all the grant and loan programs that have been coming out in the recent weeks that are all COVID related with those new programs to the state. So
Great.
We're trying to make sure that they get that as soon as it comes into our inboxes too. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, Mr. Merrick?
Well, it's kind of ironic because Brian Stokes in the center, as I look at the on-demand screen, he's in the center of our virtual Brady Bunch, the Carver Bunch right now, so we can all give him a virtual hug as we wish him well. Brian informed me that he's taking a new opportunity, so his last day with the city is going to be Friday, April 24th. So you'll see, if you haven't already, that we've posted to replace that position. But from the time that Brian's been here for, I think, up close to 6 years, more than probably anyone will ever notice, he's really created so many systems, and I'm really taking that department to another level where most folks wouldn't notice that from a day to day, but when I see the way the personnel functions, the way a capital and equipment plan for the way that we respond to different needs. He's really going to be missed. I wish him nothing but the best, and I know that he'll succeed in his new venture. So good luck, Brian.
Thank you.
We're going to miss you, Brian. All right. Is that all you had, Brent?
Yep.
Right. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a motion by Councilmember Henry
I'll second.
and a second
McKnight.
by Councilmember McKnight. Brent, do we have to do roll call for this too?
That's good.
Okay. Can you do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Henry.
Aye, Brian Henry.
Councilmember Mott.
Aye, Christie Mann.
Councilmember Sayer.
Aye, Lori Sayer.
Councilmember McKnight.
Aye, Joy McKnight.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, Courtney Johnson. The motion passes. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.